Hi and welcome to the Facial Animation for Maya Training Kit. I'm Delano Athias and I'll be your instructor through the following lessons. Throughout this kit, I'd like to share some cool tips, tricks, and principles I've learned over the years with you to help you along the path to becoming an animator. We'll explore Maya's excellent animation tools to help you achieve believable and appealing animation. You'll not only learn how to animate lip syncing, but how to speed up the workflow of lip sync animation as well. We're also going to go through several principles of animation and emotion that are essential for achieving a successful end product. And we've included some helpful diagrams as well as some reference footage to further your understanding of animating to dialogue and animating in general. So we're going to go through a lot of great material. And with that all being said, let's begin the first lesson. What we're going to do in this first lesson is set our scene up to get it ready for our animation. This scene is located in the My Data folder and it's called lesson_01 if you don't know where to find it. And I also wanted to note that for those of you who are following up from the facial setup kit, I've gone ahead and deleted the blend shapes since they're already baked, and I've also deleted their layers as well. And this was just done to clean up the scene. Okay, let's go to our preferences and change a few things. So we'll go up to Window, Settings and Preferences, Preferences. Okay. And if you want to get there a little faster, you can click on this icon here at the corner. But in our preferences, let's go down to settings. And we're going to change time from film 24 frames per second to NTSC 30 frames per second. And this is just so that our frame count in Maya will match with the frame count on our live footage that we'll be using a little bit later on. Okay, next we'll go down to animation. And under animation, we're going to change our default in and out tangency to flat. So let's do that. And why flat? Well, flat's going to allow us to get the nice subtle movements that we're looking for in our animation. Alright, so flat tendency is great to use. Next we'll go down to timeline, and in timeline we just want to fix the playback speed. We want to make sure that it's set to real time 30 frames per second, so 30 frames per second will be set. And once we've done these things, we can now hit save to save those settings. Okay, and the last thing we're going to do is go ahead and turn on auto key, and that's just going to speed up the keying process. So we want to definitely make sure that we have that turned on. And with these things done, we've completed lesson 1, and we can now move on to the next lesson, which is the beginning to our warm-up lessons. In this first warm-up lesson, we'll discuss animating head turns, blinks, and eye movements. First, I just wanted to give a brief of these warm-up lessons. They're designed not only to get you familiarized with this rig, but also to get you loosened up with animating to dialogue. Rather than just jumping into the project, I encourage you to first work on these mini lessons so when you get into the main project you'll feel a little bit more comfortable. So let's take a look at the end result of this first warm-up lesson to see what we'll be working on. And here's a play blast of it. I'll just hit play. Okay, so that's what we're going to be working on, breaking down this movement and the mechanics of this movement and applying it on our character, from the timing and spacing of the head turns and also the subtlety of that, even some slight neck movements in there, and the blinks. I'm going to be working on that, and the subtleties of the eyes. So we're going to cover a lot of great material. I'll just go ahead and hit stop and minimize. Okay, so first let's go ahead and set our start and end time. We'll set our start time to 1, and our end time we'll set to 125, the duration of our first warm-up lesson. And we could also click on frame 1 to make sure we're on it. Okay, next let's go ahead and hide our face GUI because we won't be using it just yet. So we'll select our neck control, go to the show hide GUI, and turn it from show to hide. So now it's gone. And also, if we select the head control, for example, and start rotating it around, notice how the eyes are locked onto their targets. Okay, and that could be a little bit distracting because we're going to be working on the head turns first, the head movements first. So what we can do is hit 5 on our keyboard so we won't let the eyes be of any distraction to us. Okay? And also I want to mention that we will actually be using the gimbal rotation mode, not gimbal lock but gimbal rotation mode, and here's why. Let's say if the character, right now we're in local mode for our rotation. Let's say if we rotate the character like this and we only wanted to move our character in the rotate Z, for example. Right, let's say if we wanted to clean up our F curve and only rotate it in a certain axis even though our character's head is like this. Well, watch what happens if I move in the rotate Z now. Notice how all of the channels are updating. Whereas with gimbal mode, if we're in gimbal mode and rotating, only the Z will be moving when we move the Z. And let me show you what I mean by that. So if we hold E on our keyboard and left mouse button click and hold, we get to our rotate options. Okay, and we want to select gimbal. And once we do, our constraint rings have now slightly changed. And if we go back to the Z and start moving it, notice we're only moving in the Z. So again, this is great for wanting to clean up F curves. We won't be using it for this whole entire kit, but we will be using it for this first warm-up lesson, and I just wanted to mention that to you, as it may come in handy for a project that you may be animating. So let me go ahead and bring these back to their default in case we're on gimbal. And we're just about ready to animate, but before we do, I just wanted to stress a few points. First, I highly recommend to animate the extreme poses first, then move on to the in-between poses. This technique, which is actually the pose-to-pose principle in animation, is crucial when wanting to achieve correct, believable timing, especially for animating to dialogue. And believe it or not, it may actually save you some time when animating, because rather than just jumping into the animation head-on, hoping that you'll get nice timing, with this method you'll actually be more organized with the keyframes that you'll set. You'll know precisely when certain actions should occur. So again, I highly recommend to use this technique. And also another thing I want to stress is that sometimes simple is more, meaning you don't want to get too complex with your animations unless you really need to. We just want to aim for what looks good, what's entertaining. So once your animation reaches that point, there's any extra tweaks on it may just be a waste of time. So these are the techniques that we'll be using in this kit and what we want to keep in mind when animating. Okay, so with that, that completes this first lesson, this first warm-up lesson. We can now move on to the next lesson where we'll actually begin animating. And now we're ready to begin animating for our first warm-up lesson. So as stated before in the last lesson, we're going to be working on the extremes, the extreme poses first for our character's head turns, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the in-between poses afterwards. So let's again take a look at our end result of the first warm-up lesson to see what we're trying to achieve, what those extreme poses will be. Okay, so here's our second extreme pose, and our first one is on the first frame here. That's our first. So our second is when our character is turned to his right. Then we'll hit play, and there's our next extreme pose where our character is looking towards his left now. And our last extreme pose is where our character is looking right back at us. So that's what we're going to work on. We can go ahead and minimize this now. And we'll select the head control. And with it selected, let's go ahead and key the translate and rotate channels. And we can do that by hitting Shift W and Shift E, and that'll key, the Shift W will key the translates, and Shift E will key all of our rotate channels. Okay, so now auto key will also take into effect. So if we go to any frame, like frame 16 for example, and we translate the head and then rotate it, here's what we get. Okay, so now auto key is taken into effect. Those values are now stored on frame 16. But I'm just going to delete that key. I just wanted to show you auto keys taken into effect now. Okay, now we can start posing. And when wanting to figure out certain timing, like how to figure out the certain timing of these head turns or whatever you're animating, I definitely recommend to use live reference. Get up and act out a certain action, or find some reference footage that you can use to help you to figure out how your character should move, whether biped or quadruped, doesn't matter. But the reference footage will help, so I do again recommend it. So for keying, let's go to about frame 19 and we'll put in our second extreme pose. So we'll rotate our character's head more to his right, like so. Now we'll move on to our next pose. We can put that next pose on frame 60, and we'll rotate our character's head in the opposite direction, like that. And our last extreme pose, let's put that on frame 106, and we'll have our character look more to us, but not as much. We won't rotate his head to his right as much as we did before. Okay, so that'll be fine. Alright, so once we've had these extreme poses placed, what we can do now is a play blast to see the timing. Okay, and the play blast will help us to see more accurately how our animation is moving. So we definitely want to do those play blasts. We don't want to rely on how our animation is looking in our workspace, okay, all the time. So let's now hide our NURBS curve so we could just focus on our character's head. Just focus on that movement, and we'll go to Window. Let's go to the play blast options, and I'm just going to reset them to their default so we can go down the list and make some changes. So for the time range, that's fine. We can leave that at time slider. Let's check off show ornament, and that'll hide things like the camera name or this ornament at the corner. Okay, so we could just focus on our character's face, the movement that we've just made. And for the viewer, let's go ahead and check on image viewer so we can be able to play blast with F check and view frame by frame, as well as draw on the F check, as we'll see a little bit later on. We can leave the display size from window, that's fine. Scale, let's bring that up to 1 so we can see a wider view of our animation. For save to file, you can save your play blast if you like, but I'm not going to do that. And we'll hit play blast. And while this play blast is rendering, this is a great time to view the animation while it's playing back slow, because then you get to see any corrections you may need to make in your animation. Okay, so we do want to spend this time to review our animation while the play blast is rendering, and it's just about done. Here it is. Okay, so this animation is definitely not looking like we want it to yet. It is coming along. We have made good progress. We've put in our extreme poses. Okay, but we've got more work to do. The head movements are too linear and they're just flowing back and forth. So we've got some more tweaks to do, but we have again made good progress. So we can now stop this, and that completes our extreme poses. So what we can now do is move on to the next lesson, where we'll start putting in the in-between poses and get these head turns looking more natural, more believable, which is what we want to aim for. Let's continue working on our head turns. In the last lesson, we got the timing down of when we want our head turns to occur. Okay, those were the extreme poses that we put in. So now what we want to do is work on the spacing of our head turns, the amount of time it will take to reach those poses. And by doing so, we'll also be adding a little bit more subtlety and follow through to our animation as well. So let's bring back our NURBS curves, our control curves. Okay, and we'll select our head control, and let's scrub through our timeline to see when we want those certain actions to occur, where we want to place our poses. And we'll start with this beginning segment. Okay, so right now from frames 1 to 19, the head is just, if we had played, the head is just really floating along from frames 1 to 19, and we want to add more of that natural snap that what we're getting from our final result. So if we go ahead and bring that up, start it back and hit play, notice the speed at which the head was turning, and we're not getting that same speed in our animation right now. So that's what we're going to work on. Okay, so how to do that? Well, on frame 8, let's go ahead and rotate our character's head more so that he's looking at us, like that. Not fully, but close to it. Right, closer to a value of 0 in the rotate Y. So when we hit play, notice what we get. Alright, notice the adjustment that we made just from doing that simple fix. Okay, now we get some better speed out of our head turn. Okay, now we're getting more of that natural snappiness to our head turn, that what we were seeing from our end result of the first warm-up lesson. Okay, and we don't want the movement too snappy, otherwise our animation will look abrupt and wrong. Okay, and we can't get away with too much snappy and animations like more cartoony animation. Okay, but even then we want to be careful how much snappiness we do add to our characters. Okay, so that's pretty good. Let's go ahead now and work on our next head turn. Give it the subtlety and follow through. And rather than rotating the head, what we're going to actually do is use the middle mouse button technique. And this technique is great for adding things like moving holds. Okay? And Let me show you what I'm talking about. We all know what happens if we left mouse button scrub our timeline. We're able to see the playback of our animation, of course. But now let's go ahead and middle mouse button click and drag the timeline. And notice now we're able to scrub the timeline without our animation playing back. And this is great again for doing things like moving holds, which we're about to see right now. So let's go and left mouse button click on frame 23. And now we'll middle mouse button click on about frame 48. And once we've done that, let's now go to the rotate Y and key that. So right mouse button click, key selected on the rotate Y. Now watch the movement we're able to get if we go ahead and hit play. Alright, so notice we're getting that nice subtlety out of our head motion now. Okay, we got a nice moving hold going on from frames 19 to 48. Okay, so you can really see the benefits again of utilizing the middle mouse button technique for keying and animation. So let's work on our next head turn. We'll go to frame 65 and let's middle mouse button click on about frame 94, and we'll also key the rotate Y there and notice the change. So we can go back to frame 1 and hit play, and notice the improvement that we've made out of our animation just from doing that simple fix. Okay, let's now work on putting a pose on our last frame. On frame 125 we want our animation moving all the way to the end. Okay, so on frame 125 let's now rotate our character's head more to his left just a little. Okay, so when we play back our animation, here's what we get. Alright, we're getting some nice movement, but let's do a play blast to see more accurately how our animation is looking. Definitely, again, we want to get into the habit of doing play blast. Okay, we don't want to rely on our workspace, how the animation looks in the workspace, because with the play blast we'll again see more accurately how our character is moving. Okay, and also use the play blast to or while it's playing back slow to see any areas in the animation you may want to fix. Okay, so we've got some nice movement going on in our animation. Alright, so just from doing those simple fixes, we're able to achieve a much better look. So that completes this lesson, but before we move on, I did want to show you that we can draw in the F-check window. Okay, so if we hold the right mouse button, click and drag, notice we're able to do a few drawings in there. So this is great for doing certain things like line of actions, or wanting to draw a certain disposition of your character that you're trying to reach. Okay, or if you wanted to be funny and draw a little mustache on the character. Okay, but you can draw on the F-check and it is very helpful. And if you hit play, notice how the drawing doesn't show up until you reach the frame that you drew on. Okay, and if you ever want to clear a frame, okay, of a drawing, make sure you're on the frame that you drew on, and go to File and select Revert. And notice now that cleans up the frame. So I did want to show you that. But with all of these things done, we have completed this lesson, and we can now move on to the next lesson, where we'll continue working on our head turns to get them looking more believable, more natural. In this lesson, we'll actually complete the rotate Y pass of our head movement. So again, this pass in our animation is going to give us nicer follow through. Okay, let's take a look at our end result again, just so we can stay focused on what we're trying to achieve. Go ahead, play. Okay, so that's what we're going to be working on, getting some nicer follow through again out of the head, and really adding more to the believability of our head turns. So go ahead and stop that, and we can minimize it now and bring back our NURBS curves and select the head control. So where do we want to add these poses for the follow through? Well, we want to look for areas of long segments, like for example from frames 19 to 48. We can add another pose in between there, and also here's another example from frames 60 to 94. We can add another pose in between there, just to keep our character moving, keep them looking alive. We don't want any dead poses in our animation, otherwise our animation will look dead, and we don't even have any dead poses in our animation, so that's great. But we want to make sure that our characters are constantly moving, constantly looking like they do have some form of vigor to them. And we don't want to, depending on the certain shot, we don't want to have our characters moving too much, okay? Because then that'll take away from the believability of our animation. Maybe in more cartoony animations you may want more movement, but still you need to be careful how much movement you give your character. So there's a balance that we want to aim for. But let's go ahead and add these poses now. So I think we could add a pose on frame 33. So let's do that. We'll go to frame 33 and we'll go into our rotation mode and rotate the head more so that he's looking towards us just a little bit. Remember, just slight movements. So when we scrub through, it looks like our character's head is shaking. Okay. Alright, next, let's go ahead and add our next follow through pass, and we can do that on frame 76, and we'll again rotate our character's head so he's looking more at us, not much. Okay. And for our last pose, I think we could add one on frame 115 and again have our character's head turn more towards us, or a little bit more to his left, like that. Okay, now let's go ahead and do a play blast to see our results, to see if we like the movement that we're getting. So we'll just go to Window and hit Play Blast. And I'm just going to pause the video, but remember to spend this time to review the animation to see any areas that you may want to change. And here's our Play Blast. Okay, notice we're getting some nicer movement out of our head turns. But I think we could make a few more adjustments because, like for example, that first head turn coming up right now, I think the character's head is shaking a little bit too much. I like the second head turn, but that last head turn, I think we could also adjust that because right here, seems that our character's head comes to somewhat of a stop. Okay, so we can adjust that. Let's go ahead and close out our F check now and work on that. We'll bring back our NURBS curves and select the head control. And the way we can do that is rather than changing that from the timeline, we can do it more effectively from the graph editor. So let's do that. Let's go to our perspective and graph view. Okay, and we want to select the rotate Y so we can just focus on our rotate Y F curve, what we're keying on. And we'll hit F so we can frame our F curve. Make sure that it's in view. So no matter where our view is in the graph view, we'll just hit F and we get a nice whole view of our F curve. Now let's go ahead and work on those adjustments. So remember we wanted to adjust the first head turn, so let's do that. To see our area that we want to adjust in more detail, what we can do is select the key, like on frame 33 for example, and hit F. And that, look, watch what that does. That allows us to see our curve again in more of a detail so we can see the influence that this key has, this pose that we've made, okay, in this region of time. So what we can do is actually go ahead and decrease the value of this key. Alright, so let's hold shift and middle mouse button, click and drag down. Okay, and that'll isolate our movement either up and down. But let's drag down just a little bit. Okay, just to decrease that value there. So when we scrub through, here's what we get. Some more nice subtler follow through in our animation. Okay, so now we can go ahead and work on our next key, which is at the end here. So we can select that key on frame 115 and hit F. And here's another tip. If you want to go ahead and see your curve in more detail, another thing you can do is hold Alt Shift and right mouse button, click and drag either up and down to scale the curve up and down, or left and right to scale the curve left and right. Okay, or in and out. Okay, and this is great again for seeing more detail out of the F curve. But on this key on frame 115, if we hit F on it to view its detail, notice the reason why we're not getting too much movement is because this region looks too flat, too planey. Alright, whereas if we want our character to look like he's got a little vigor to him, we'd want more of a hilly looking or a hillier look going on with our F curve. Okay, so that's another little tip if you want to add a little bit more movement. That works great for things like the Translate Y for adding bop to the body. Okay, so let's go ahead and adjust that key so that we're getting a little bit more movement in our animation at this span of time. So we'll hold shift and middle mouse button, click and drag up like that. Not much. We want subtle movement. So if we scrub through, here's what we get. Okay, maybe we even brought it up a little bit too much, so we can hold shift and bring it down a little bit. Okay, now we can do a play blast of our animation to see what we've done, to see our results if we like them. So we'll go to Window, Play Blast, and again, I'm just going to pause the video. Here's our play blast. Okay, so notice we're getting some nicer movement going on from just making those simple adjustments. Alright, so that's our rotate Y movement. And once we've done these things, we can now move on to the next lesson, where we're actually going to discuss a principle of animation called arcs, which is going to add more to the believability of our head turns. It's going to make them look more natural. And what I'm actually going to do as well is hold on to this play blast for that next lesson. So we've completed the rotate Y or side-to-side movements of the head turns in the last lesson, and now we're going to discuss adding the arcing motion and anticipation to our animation. Let's go ahead and look at our latest play blast. So I'll bring that up. We'll hit play. We can see that the animation is definitely making good progress, but what's it missing? Well, one thing that it's missing that's also an essential principle in animation is arc. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this. Alright, and right now our character's head is turning left and right. Here's the movement that we're getting. And it's linear. What it's missing is the arc and the head turns. And that's going to make it look more natural, more believable. See, we humans and animals too naturally move in arcs. Therefore, organic characters must have arcs in their movement too if they're to look believable to the audience. We want to stay away from this linear motion like we're getting here in our characters. Even some mechanical characters like robots, for example, should have some arc in their motion. So we definitely want to make sure that our animation is not missing this key principle. And we're also going to focus on adding some anticipation. And what that is the build up to the action. So what we can say is, first you tell them what you're going to do, and then you do the action, and then you tell them what you've done. Okay, and we're going to add this subtly to this animation. And we want to make sure we add that because we also move in anticipation, whether that be a pitch or even a swing of a baseball bat or whatever. And animations missing this key ingredient look abrupt. And there are times when no anticipation is great for things like surprises in cartoony animation, when you want to add that snap to them, or other things, for example, but for a majority of the time, you don't want to leave it out. So let's now apply those principles to him. We'll close out this F check and we'll bring back our NURBS curves and select the head control. Okay, so first we add the anticipation, and then we're going to add the arc on the head turns, and then we'll add some follow through after that. Okay, which will be the ending of the anticipation, you could say, and also the follow through as well. Okay, so remember it's the anticipation first, so let's go to frame 5, and on frame 5 let's rotate our character's head up some, just a little bit like that. Okay, and now we'll add the arcing motion of the head, so we'll go to frame 12, and on frame 12 let's now rotate the head down. Okay, let's see, like that. Okay, and we'll scrub through to see what we like, if we like what we're getting. Alright, maybe we could bring his head down a little bit more. Alright, watch the movement that we're getting. So our character's head goes up for the anticipation, and then sloops down for the arc and the head turn. Now we need to add the follow through. So let's go to frame 21, and we'll now rotate the head up. Okay, so now we'll scrub through and look at the movement that we're getting, and notice how much more natural this first head turn looks just from adding those simple tweaks. Okay, so let's work on the next head turn now. So first, remember we add the anticipation, so on frame 45 we'll rotate the head up slightly, And then for the arc, let's go ahead and put that on about frame 54. And we'll now rotate the character's head down. Like that. And we can scrub through and see if we like the movement. Maybe we could bring down the head a little bit more. Okay, and now we'll add the follow through. So we can add that on frame 61. And we'll bring the head up. Like that. Okay. We'll scrub through to see if we like the movement. And it's looking good. Alright, let's now add that to our last head turn. So we'll add the anticipation on frame 90, and we can bring the head up slightly. Not too much. Okay, then we want to slope it down. Let's go to about frame 99, and we'll bring the head down now. Like that. And we'll add the follow through. Let's add that follow through on frame 109. We'll just bring the head up. And we'll scrub through to see if we like the movement. Okay, let's now do a play blast to see if we like the results. Okay, so we can see more accurately how our animation is looking. So we'll go up to Window, Play Blast. I'm just going to pause the video during this play blast. And here it is. So notice the natural movement that we're getting now from our animation. Now our character's head turns look more believable. Okay? So we can see the pluses of adding those two principles that we've added, the anticipation and the arcs, to our animation. Notice how much it's added to it. Okay, and they were really simple tweaks too. Simple yet effective. Okay, so what we're going to do now, or what we can do now, is move on to the next lesson. And in the next lesson, we're going to add another pass of the rotate X movement. We're just going to add a little bit more to our animation. Let's continue working on the arcing motions of our head turns. Now we'll work on adding a few more subtleties to the arcing motion of the head to finish up the rotate X movement. So we'll bring back our NURBS curves and we'll select the head control. Let's also go to our perspective graph view, and we just want to focus on the rotate X, so we'll select that in the graph editor outliner and hit F. So where do we want to add these poses? Well, we want to add them again through these long segments of time, like towards the beginning of our animation here, and also towards the end. And we even want to add something right at the end of the animation. We want to keep our character moving in the rotate X towards the end. Okay? So we'll keep our graph editor open, and let's also bring that down, decrease the window size a bit. Okay, so we can see where we want to put our poses, and let's go ahead and put our first pose about frame 34. And on frame 34, what we can do is rotate our head down slightly, just a little bit, like that. And remember, we want to keep our F curves looking hilly like this. Okay, through some of our attributes, so through some of our rotations, and that's going to keep our character looking alive throughout the animation. Okay, so let's play back our animation to see if we like what we're getting. We could also hide our NURBS curves here, deselect and hit play. Okay, and we can even focus in on the perspective so we could really look at the movement in detail. Okay, so if we look close, we can see that we're getting some nice movement. Let's go ahead and continue. We'll bring back our NURBS curves. We'll select the head control, and we'll work on that next segment. Let's go to about frame 76, and on frame 76, we'll also rotate the head down a little bit, like that. Maybe we could bring down the key a little bit more. Maybe that's a little bit too much. Okay. All right. Now let's go back into our perspective and hide our NURBS curves and go ahead and play back the animation to see if we like what we're getting. All right. So we can see that our head turns are looking more natural now that we've added those little poses in there. Again, giving the head a little bit more subtlety to the turns. So let's continue now. We'll bring back the NURBS curves, and we'll select the head control, go back to the graph editor view, just select the rotate X, and we'll now work on the end of the animation. So remember, we want to keep our F curves hilly so we can keep our character looking alive. So let's go to about frame 115, and we'll also rotate the head down slightly, like that. Okay, and then we'll scrub through to see if we like the movement. It's looking pretty good. And since we moved the head down on frame 115, to finish it off and to keep the F curve looking hilly, we can go ahead and now rotate the head up slightly. Okay, maybe could decrease that value a little bit more. Okay, let's do a F check now, or a play blast, to see more accurately how our animation is looking. So go to Window, Play Blast. And also, don't be afraid to experiment with your animation. Go ahead and add another pose or two if it's going to add to the appeal of it. See if it works, and if it doesn't, well, simply get rid of it. But those type of experiments is also what's going to help you to get better. Okay, so our Play Blast is just about finished. Here it is. Wait for it to update. And here we go. Alright, so we're getting some nice movement now. Okay, now our head turns are looking natural, they're looking believable. Okay. And what we're gonna do now is, or what we can do now is move on to the next lesson, where we're gonna add a little bit more arc to this head turn and give our character a little bit more personality. We'll now complete the arcing motion of our head turns. What we're going to do is add some rotate Z movement in our animation, which is going to add a little bit of personality to our character. Personality is another one of those key principles of animation we don't want to leave out, because we all have a certain personality to us. So our characters should too. We want to make sure that the audience will be able to empathize or relate with our characters, or else we'll lose their attention. So again, we're just going to add a little personality to this animation, nothing major. Let's bring back our nerves curves. We'll select our head control, and we're going to be moving in the rotate Z. Again, okay. So what this movement is also going to be is follow through movement. Alright, we're going to give the head a little bit more of a swing. So let's see. Remember, we're also going to follow the same principle that we did in the when we were figuring out the rotate X movement. So we're going to add the anticipation first. Then we're going to add the follow through, the head swing, and then more follow through after that. So let's go to frame 1. On frame 1, we'll rotate the head towards the right, and that's going to be the anticipation. And why do we want to do that? Well, our character is actually moving his head to the right, and while it's moving to the right, while the head is moving to the right, we're going to swing it to the left. Alright, so to add to the anticipation, we're going to actually rotate the character's head to the right first. So when it swings to the left, when the head's moving to the right, it's going to look a little bit more appealing. Alright, so we'll rotate the head like that. And let's go to about frame 14 now. And let's rotate the head now to the character's left. Like that. And now we need to add a little bit more follow through. So we need to add the follow through after this. And the follow through is going to be where the head now goes back to the right, the direction that it turned in. So we can add that by going to about frame, let's go to about frame 22, and we'll just rotate the head now in the opposite direction. Okay, so when we play back, watch what we get. Alright, let's go ahead and hit play to see how our animation's looking. Okay, so you can see that now our head turns have a little bit more personality to it. Okay, so we'll continue this process. Let's go ahead and work on the next head turn. So let's go to about frame, maybe about frame, let's see, maybe about frame 46. And on frame 46, we'll add our anticipation. So now our character's head is rotating to his left. So we're going to want to first rotate in the Z to the left. Then during the head swing, which we can put on about frame 55, we'll now rotate the head to the right. Okay, so let's do that. Like so. And we'll scrub through to see how our animation is looking. Okay, now we'll add the follow through to that. So let's go to about frame 62. Now on frame 62, we'll go ahead now and rotate the head to the left, the direction that the head turned, slightly, like that. And we'll scrub through to see if we like the movement we're getting. Okay. Now let's apply this to our last head turn. So let's go to about frame 91 and add our anticipation. Now the head's going to be turning to the right again, so we're going to rotate the head slightly to the right, like that. Then we'll scrub through and find out where we can add the head swing, a follow through to that. Let's go to frame 100, and now we'll rotate the head to the left slightly. Okay, and this is not a big head turn, so we're not going to want to rotate it as much as we would with the other head turns. Okay, and it also depends on the timing. So the amount at which to rotate the head also depends on the speed at which the character is turning his head. And this last head turn is not as fast as the others, so we want to keep that in mind when we're rotating our character's head. So that should be fine, that pose that we've done. And now let's add the follow through. So we can go to frame 110, and we'll now rotate the head in towards the direction it turned, like that. Okay. And we'll go ahead and bring the head back on the last frame. So we'll go to frame 125, and since we rotated the head to the right, the follow through is going to be moving the head to the left slightly. Okay, now let's do a play blast to see how our animation's looking. So we'll focus the head in and go to Windows and do a play blast. I'm just going to pause the video. Here's the play blast. Alright, now look at how natural our head turns look. Okay, now they're moving more human-like. Okay, what we can do now is spend the time to go through our tangency and make sure that they're adjusted the way we want to, so we can get the most out of our animation. So let's bring back our NURBS curves. We'll select our head control and we'll go back to our perspective graph view. And in the graph view, we're going to go down through each of our rotate attributes, each of our channels, and see if we could adjust any of the tangency on the channels. Okay, so let's start with the rotate X, and we'll hit F. Okay, and what we want to look for are any tangents that are not necessarily peak keys. And what I mean by that is, here's an example. Here's a peak key here, and then here's a peak key. So they're the ones that make up the hilly F curve. All right. So if we had a key, for example, where the key was more planar with the adjacent key next to it, like for example, if we had a key like that, okay, we'd probably want to adjust the tangency of either or of these keys, so that they'd have more of a flow, more of a curve. And if we go ahead and look at this key more in detail, let's hit F and really adjust our view so we can see the curve in more detail. Okay, we'd want to go ahead and adjust our curve so we can get more of an arc, so we can get the most again out of our animation. But I'm just going to undo back. Just wanted to show you what we'd want to look for when adjusting our tangency. But the rotate X looks fine, so let's move on to the rotate Y. Hit F, and we'll look for keys that we can possibly adjust. Okay, so we'll go ahead and zoom in, and these keys look fine. Let's see. Maybe we could adjust this one on frame 8. So we'll select that key and hit F. And we'll also see the curve in a little bit more detail. Alright. So notice we got some flat tangency here. So what we want to do is just edit the tangency a little bit so our curve flows nicer. So we can select the left side of this tangent handle, and we'll middle mouse button click and drag down And watch what happens. Now we're able to edit the influence that this F curve has through this span of time. Alright, so now our F curve is flowing better. Okay, let's check out our rotate Z movement. So we'll hit F, frame that curve, and we've got our peak keys in there. We don't have any keys that aren't peak keys, so this is fine. Okay, so we can now do a play blast just to see if we can notice any difference in our animation from the adjustments we made. So go to Window, Play Blast, and I'll just pause the video. Here's the play blast. Okay, so we may not notice any major changes from the adjustments we made of the tangency because it was a minor key. Okay, it wasn't anything major, so but I do recommend that you still go through your tangency and adjust any tangents that can possibly, just add more to your animation once they're adjusted. And that completes the arcing motion of our head turns. So in the next lesson we'll actually finish up our head movement. Let's finish up our head movements. Here's where we're going to add some neck movement. Alright, we're going to make it subtle. And this is also where the simple is more principle will come into play, because we won't be animating the neck in all directions, just in the direction that we need to, the translate X or side to side movement. See, the simple is more principle depends on the certain shot that you're animating. Let's say we're in a production and we're given this front view shot to animate the face in, and we're told to animate the head as we are doing now. Okay, there wouldn't be need to animate in the translate Z or the front to back movement unless the shot called for the character to be doing a certain movement in that direction. But if the movement's going to be too subtle to even notice, there's no need to add it. Alright, so this will actually save us some time in animating. So let's begin. We'll bring back our NURBS curves and we'll select our head control. Alright, and just like the rotate X and the Z, we'll be adding the anticipation first and then the follow through movement. And how do we figure out this movement? Well, simple. We'll just move the neck in the direction that the head is turning in. And this isn't always the case. Let's say, for example, your character's trying to dodge something. Even though he's looking in this direction, maybe he'll translate his head in the opposite direction. Okay? But because this is a casual head turn, we'll just go ahead and translate the neck in the direction that the head is turning. So let's begin. Alright, we'll add our anticipation first. And since our character is going to be turning his head first to his right, we'll go ahead and translate the head now to the right. And before we start keying any further, what we can do is go into our perspective and graph view, because notice how our timeline is getting a little bit cluttered with keys. So we could just use our graph editor to help us focus on the keys that we're setting. So let's select the translate X and hit F to frame this region. Okay, and this will help us to see a cleaner view of our translate X keys that we're about to be setting. So let's add our follow through now. We'll scrub through, and we could go to about frame 11 now and move the head in the direction of the character's left. And we could also use the direction that the character's head is turned in right now as reference for when laying our translate X keys, because we did rotate his head to the left in the Z, so we can just go ahead and use that as a helper or as a guide to figure out the movement of our translate X as well. Okay, so we'll scrub through to see the movement we're getting. Okay, now let's continue the follow through, so we can go to frame 23 now, and now that our character's head is finally rotated to his right, can now translate the head slightly to the right. Remember, we want to keep it subtle. Okay, alright, so we can scrub through to see the movement we're getting now. Okay, and it's subtle, but it's still adding to our animation. Alright, let's go ahead and work on the next head turn. We could also hit F in our graph editor so we could see our curve in more detail. And let's go ahead and add our next anticipation on about frame 43. So since our character is going to be looking to his left now, we can actually translate the neck to the left. to his left slightly. Okay, now we'll add the follow-through movement, so we could go to about frame 50, and we'll move the neck to the right slightly, like so. Alright, and to finish the follow-through, we can go to about frame 63, and now move the character's neck to his left, the direction that the head's turning in. Alright, and now we'll work on our last head turn, so let's go ahead and scroll on down, and we can add our anticipation on frame 88. And remember, the character's head is rotating back to the right, okay, but not as much as what we had in the beginning of our animation, so we want to keep that in mind when wanting to animate the translate Z, or translate X, excuse me. So we won't be moving the head as much as we did initially in the beginning of our animation. So since he is moving to the right, let's go ahead and translate the head slightly to the right. Okay, and we also want to keep in mind the speed that he's doing that in, and it's not going to be as much as the other head turns. The speed's not going to be as fast, so we'll keep that in mind as well. Alright, now we'll add our follow through on about frame 96, and we'll translate the head now to his left slightly. And for the follow through after, let's go to about frame 107, and we'll now translate the character's neck to the right, like so. Okay, and to finish the follow through, let's go to our last frame, and we'll translate the character's neck slightly to the left, since we already moved in the right. Not much. Alright, there we go, and we can check out our F curves too. Okay, and check out the animation that we're getting. And if we wanted to, we could even tweak some of these keys. So let's say if our character's neck is moved a little bit too much to the to his left in this region of the animation, what we can do is select all of these keys, hold shift and middle mouse button, click and drag down slightly. Alright, and notice what that's doing. That's changing the influence that these keys have. Alright, it's allowing us to fix our movement that we're getting in our animation. Okay, let's see. Let's go into our perspective and let's see the movement that we're getting. Alright, let's actually do a play blast, and we'll hide our NURBS curves. And we'll go up to Window, Play Blast. And I'm just going to pause the video. Here's the Play Blast. Alright, so those subtle neck movements really added to our animation, and we could also see that we really didn't need to key in the Translate Z at all. Okay, so with that we have completed our head and neck movements, and if we go ahead and stop this and minimize it and bring up our final result, we can see our progress. Okay, and all we have left to do now is the eyes and the blinks. So that's what we're going to work on in the next lesson. Now we'll work on the eye movements and blinks and finish up this warm-up lesson. Let's work on the eye movement first. So how do the eyes move? Well, here's a few diagrams that's going to help us figure that out. I'll just bring up the first one. Okay, here illustrates someone throwing a football. And let's just say someone asked us to focus on the thrown football. Well, that's what we do. We target on that football as it's being thrown. Okay, but now let's look at another diagram. I'll minimize that and bring this one up. And here we see a similar situation, only this time there's no football. And let's just say now the person asked us to pretend to focus on a thrown football. Well, we try to do that, but our eyes would actually target on certain objects along the way. So that's how our eyes move. Go ahead and minimize this. And I also want to note that, remember how I said that we want to try to stay away from linear movements in our animation? Well, there are exceptions, and this is one of them. We want linear tangency in our eye movements, and this isn't always the case. Let's say our character was rolling his eyes, for example, then we would want a smooth tangency for that. So we just need to discern which tangency to use when animating the eyes. And we're also going to get some snappy movements, some snappy turns out of our eyes, some pretty quick turns. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'll bring back the final result for this first warm-up lesson, and I'll start it back over and hit play. And notice the eyes are moving pretty quickly from target to target. Okay, so that's what we're going to work on, and we're also going to work on the subtlety of the eyes. Okay, so we'll stop that, and we'll break the eye movements down in passes. Okay, so we're going to do the extremes, then we'll do the moving holds where our eyes are focused, and we'll also get the spacing of when our character's eyes focus on a different target. Then we'll work on the subtlety, and after we'll switch our tangency from flat to linear to complete the eye movements. So we'll bring back our NURBS curves, and let's hit 6 on our keyboard so we can view the texture of the eyes. We'll select our eyes control, and we'll only be moving in the translate X and Y. So we'll make sure we're on frame 1 and key those. And let me also mention, or let me ask another question. What leads what? That's an important question we need to ask as animators. Okay, so for the eyes and for the head, what would lead what? Would the eyes lead the head, or would the head lead the eyes? Well, it all depends. Okay, let me bring up a few scenarios. Let's say that, for example, our character was talking to someone to his left. Okay, and let's say now the conversation was about over and he was walking away. In that case, his head would start to lead, and then his eyes would follow after, because his eyes would still be focused on the person he's talking to, but once he's done, then his eyes would then follow afterwards. But let me go ahead and flip that around. Let's say now our character heard a loud noise towards his right. Then his eyes would lead, and his head would follow after, okay, to find out what that loud noise was. But I'm just going to undo back those changes. So keeping that in mind, what we're going to do is actually have the eyes lead. Let's say our eyes are just focusing on certain targets, okay, just like what we explained before initially. So we're going to have our eyes lead. So let's work on that. We'll go to frame 14 just before our character's head is turned fully to his right. And we'll go into our translate manipulator, hit W. And now let's translate our character's eyes to his right. And we could also move them up a little bit. Okay, so that's our first extreme, or our second actually. Our first was on that first frame. Let's work on our third extreme. So we could go to frame 55 just before our character's head is turned to his left, and we'll bring the eyes over, and we can bring them down a little bit. And our last extreme, we'll have our character focus more on us. So let's go to frame 102 just before our character has turned his head to his right, and we'll have his eyes focus more on us, like that. Now let's do a play blast to review our results. So we'll hide our NURBS curves, focus our character's head in, and we'll do a play blast. And I'm just going to pause the video. Here's the play blast. And we can see that our eyes are not looking right. We do have more tweaks to do, because now they're just floating along. They're not moving correctly at all. So let's go ahead and work on the tweaks. What we're going to do now is work on the moving hold pass. So we'll close this out. We're actually going to be using the middle mouse button technique for that. So let's select the eyes. And remember, this moving hold we're going to add, we're also going to get the spacing that we'll need for the eyes to snap to their next target. So that's what we're also going to work on. So let's go to frame 14. Our character is focused to his right first, and we'll middle mouse button click now on about frame 46 where we want the moving hold to end, and we'll go ahead and we'll key the translate X and Y. Alright, so now throughout this duration of time, our character is focused on a certain target, and then his eyes snap to his next target, just like what we want. So let's work on the next moving hold. We'll go to frame 55 where our character is now focused on a target to his left, and we can middle mouse button click now on about frame 94. So throughout this duration of time, we'll have his eyes locked, and we'll hit key selected. Okay, and then we also have the snap that we want, where our character is now looking at us. And we won't have to worry about this last segment just yet. So now we can do another play blast and review the timing that we've just done. So we'll hit play. And I'll just pause the video. And here's the play blast. And now we can see the timing is much better on our eyes. We have much better spacing, okay, as well. So we can now stop this. And what we're going to do now is work on the subtlety of the eyes. So we'll select the eyes control. And let's see, let's add the subtlety on the last two eye turns. We're not going to add it on the first. And why is that? Well, we don't want any linear consistency in our animation. Okay, we want it so that there's some natural offset going on, just to add to, again, the believability for animation. That's what we want to, one thing we want to aim for. We want our animation to look believable so our audience can relate. So we'll add the subtlety on our last two eye turns. So let's go to about frame 69. And on frame 69, we'll just key in the translate X and Y. And this is just so that the position that the eyes are in will be the same on frame 55. So we could have a moving hold from frame 55 to 69. Now let's work on the eye snap, or the subtlety of the eyes, which should be snappy movement. So we'll go to frame 73 now. And let's just move the eyes. Let's say the eyes move down some and more towards the character's right, like that. Okay, so when we scrub through, we can see we're getting some nice subtlety now from the eyes. And we could even add another subtlety. So on frame 73, let's go now and middle mouse button click on about frame 89, and we'll hit key selected. So now we can have the eyes having their moving hold throughout this amount of time. And we'll go to frame 94 now, and on frame 94, let's have the eyes move a little bit more. We'll change the pose slightly so we can have the eyes move up and more towards the left, like that. So if we scrub through, here's what we get. Okay, now let's add some subtlety towards the end of our animation. So let's middle mouse button click on about frame 107 after we've left mouse button clicked on frame 102. So make sure we're on that frame of 102, and we'll middle mouse button click on frame 107 so we can have the moving hold there. And now let's go to about frame 110. And on frame 110, what we can do is let's bring the eyes down some and more towards the left. Okay, and I also want to mention that we don't want to have too much movement going on. Okay, this is also where the simple is more principle comes in. Okay, so alright, so now we're getting some nice movement out of that, and we could even add another subtlety in the eyes. So let's go to frame 117 and we'll key the translate X and Y, and we'll go ahead now and go to frame 120, and we'll move the eyes up, and let's move them a little bit over to the right. Okay, now let's do another play blast to see what we've done. So we'll hide the NURBS curves, focus our character's head in, and do a play blast. And I'm just going to pause the video. Here's the play blast. So we'll examine it, and notice now we're getting some nice subtlety out of our eyes. It's not much, it's just right. Okay, so again, we don't want to add too much subtlety, because then that'll take away from the animation. The eyes will probably look too weird, or excuse me, will look weird if you add too much movement in there, but we added just enough where the animation will look believable, will look normal. Okay, so now we'll do our last step. So we'll stop this, close out the F check, and we'll bring back our NURBS curves. We'll select the eyes control, and now we need to change the tangency of our translate X and Y to linear. So we'll go to our perspective graph view, and we'll make sure that we're on our translate X and Y, and we are. Okay, so we can just select the eyes control so we can see both of them. And we'll select this icon to switch our tangency to linear. Now let's do another play blast and see if we can notice any change. So I'll go to Window, Play Blast, and I'm going to pause the video again. Here's the play blast. Okay, so the change is subtle, but we're still getting the proper movement out of the eyes. Okay, so there is a slight change, and we can even hit the period key on our number pad so we can zoom into the eyes. That'll allow us to zoom into our F-check, and we can really notice the subtle changes just from doing the tangency switch from flat to linear. Okay, so that's the movement on the eyes, and what we're actually going to work in the next lesson, what we're going to work on in the next lesson is doing the blinks, and we'll finish up the warm-up lesson there. Now let's add blinks and finish up our animation. So how do we figure out the timing of the blinks and even the spacing of the blinks? Well, first off, we normally blink when we change a thought or change direction. So we're going to add the blinks just before the head turns, even at the beginning of our eye turns, just before they reach their target. Okay, and as far as the spacing, we're going to give them a 2 to 4 frame spacing. So we're going to have 2 frames on the blink, and we'll open back up the eyes 4 frames afterwards. So let's go ahead and bring back our NURBS curves, and we'll select our neck control, and we'll go to our show hide GUI. We'll bring our face GUI back. So we'll go to show, select that, and there it is. Okay, and we're actually going to change things up just a little bit. What we're going to do is have a blink right after the last head turn. And why is that? Well, that's to add again to the natural offset of our animation, just so it could look more believable. And I know I keep stressing that because it's very important. Okay, so let's start. Let's start from the beginning of our animation, and we'll select both blink controls. And again, remember, the blinks are going to occur just as the eyes start to move. So let's go to frame 2. And on frame 2, we'll hit Shift W, and that keys all of our translates. So since we only have a translate Y on our blink controls, it'll key that for us. Then remember, we'll go 2 frames after and add our blink. So let's go ahead and hit W now on our keyboard to get to our translate manipulator, and we'll now translate down to blink the eyes. Okay, then we'll go 4 frames after that, so we'll go to frame 8, and we'll open the eyes back up. So if we go ahead and focus in on the eyes and scrub through our animation, notice we're getting some nice blinks. So let's work on the next blink. Alright, so we'll go to about frame 46, just as the eyes are starting to move to the left now, and we'll hit Shift W. Then we'll go 2 frames after for the blink, so frame 48, we'll close the eyes. And 4 frames after that, on frame 52, we'll open the eyes back up. Okay, so if we scrub through, we can see that we're getting some nice blinks. Alright, they're looking pretty natural. Let's now work on that last blink. And again, we are changing things up just a little bit. Okay, just to add a little bit more to our animation. So let's go ahead and go to frame 107, just after the head turns. We'll hit Shift W, go 2 frames after, blink the eyes, and 4 frames after that, open the eyes back up. Okay, now let's do a play blast to see our results. So we'll hide our NURBS curves, and we'll focus our character's head in, and do a play blast. I'm just going to pause the video. Here's the play blast. Okay, notice we're getting some nice natural blinks going. But we could even go even further and make the blinks look even more natural. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll stop our F-check, we'll close it out. And what we're going to do is actually adjust the tangency on our blinks, just to adjust the spacing of them, okay? So let me go ahead and adjust the right blink first so we can see the difference between our right blink to our left blink, which will not have its tangency adjusted just yet. So we'll select the right blink control, and then we'll go to our perspective graph view, and let's hit F so we can focus on our F curve. And we'll also hold Alt, Shift, and right mouse button drag to our right so we can see our curve in more detail. And to adjust the tangency on the F curve, what we're going to do is we're going to select the key where the blink is occurring, and we'll break the tangency, and then we're going to adjust the tangent so that our blink really pushes down hard. Alright, so the blink really pushes down quickly. Okay, and then it opens up not as quick. Okay, but we're going to get the natural blink from doing that. So once we've broken the tangency on this blink key, we'll now select the left side. Going to adjust that first. Middle mouse button, click and drag upward to adjust the tangency like so. So we get this curve going. And we're going to do the same thing for the right side now. So let's do that. Okay, once we've done that, we'll now go ahead and zoom in to our eyes so we can notice the difference. And when we scrub through, you can see the slight difference from our blinks. Okay, now it is subtle again, but we are getting more natural movement out of our blinks. Okay, and that's what we want to aim for. So let's now apply that to our left blink. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll shift select that left blink control so we can have it in our graph editor. Okay, so we want to match up the F curves. So let's now go ahead and just select the translate Y in our graph editor outliner of the left blink. We'll select that key, break the tangency. Okay, now let's go ahead and we'll select the right blink control again so we can view that to match up our left blink with our right blink F curve. Okay, and it doesn't have to be exact. Okay, it's probably better if it's not exact because we don't move with symmetry. Okay, so we could have them offset just slightly. And we'll do the same thing for the next side. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and work on the other blinks now. We'll do the same thing. Make sure we have both our right and left blink control selected. We'll select the blink key, break the tangency, and do our adjustments like that. And we can go ahead and offset the F curve slightly, so we can go to our right control, for example, and offset the curve just slightly. Okay, now let's work on our last blink, and we'll do the same thing. Make sure that we have both of our blinks selected so we can select their tangents at the same time. Break the tangency, adjust it, and we can go to our left blink control and adjust the F curve just slightly, okay, to offset their values a little bit more. Okay, now let's go ahead and do another play blast to see our results. So we'll hide our NURBS curves, focus our character's head in, and do a play blast. And again, I'm just going to pause the video. And here's our play blast. Okay, so now we're getting some natural movement out of our blinks. Okay, now they look better just from doing those tweaks, and remember they were subtle. Okay, but it did add to the natural movement of the blinks. And with that, we've actually completed this warm-up lesson. And we can now move on to the next one. We're going to discuss facial expressions. The second warm-up lesson will focus on facial animation. We'll discuss some fundamentals and essential points to keep in mind when doing this process. This file is also in the My Data folder, and it's called warmup02_lesson_01. It's actually the end of the first warm-up lesson. Okay, so we'll actually be just adding on to that. Let's now take a look at the end result of this warm-up lesson to figure out what we're going to be working on. Alright, so I'll start that from its first frame and hit play. And that's what we're going to be doing, just taking this information and applying it onto our character. Okay, and this process of facial animation is obviously something very important. We want to get down right because we want to be able to persuade to the audience that this character is just like them in a way. Okay, we want to keep in mind empathy. We want to have the audience be able to empathize or relate with our characters. And when animating the face, the most important area we want to get down right is the eyes. okay, because that's the area that we have most of our focus on. And another principle in animation that we're going to keep in mind is exaggeration. That's very important. Even if you were to animate something photoreal, for example, you'd still have to add a little bit of exaggeration to the movement, because if you don't, the animation may still look a little awkward. The character may look a little bit too stiff. Okay, so we can now stop this and minimize it. So that's what we're going to be working on, and again, it's just to help us to not only be more comfortable with the main project, but also with any other animation projects you'll be working on. We'll be using a facial animation preset too. So if we go ahead and select it, it's right here. Okay, and it takes us to our face cam and our face user interface cam. Okay, so we can focus on those two. And if you don't have it loaded up, what you can do is go to a panel preset that you don't really use. Like this one was the Hypershade perspective panel. Okay, if I don't really use that, so what you can do is right mouse button, click on it, and there it is, facial animation right at the bottom of the list. So once you select it, it should take you here. And this preset is going to make it more convenient for us to animate the face under situations where animating the face would be a little bit troublesome. So if we go to our perspective, for example, let's say if we had to animate the face where the character was turned upside down and perhaps rotated about 180 degrees in the Y, like that. Okay, notice it would be a little bit troublesome to animate the face like this. Okay, but if we go to our preset, watch. Notice our character's face is still upright and the GUI is too. Okay, so you can see from just utilizing this certain preset how more convenient it's going to be on our part to animate our character's face. Okay, so we can go back to our perspective now and bring the neck control back to its default if you moved it at all. And another thing we're going to be doing is creating a shot camera. We're going to keep it more of like a production type environment in our scene, and that's going to help us to focus on the camera angle that really counts. Okay, so we'll go to create and we'll go to cameras and create a camera, and let's call it shot cam. Once we've done that, let's go ahead now and look through it. So make sure it's selected and go to panels, look through selected, and we'll position this camera right in front of our character's face like that. So that's our camera angle we'll be rendering from. And if you ever wanted to render this shot and you wanted to make sure that the character's head is in the shot, you could always go to view and the camera settings and turn on things like the resolution gate and or the safe action gate. Okay, and stuff like that. But we won't be doing any of that. We'll just be creating this shot camera. Okay, and we also want to scrub through our animation to make sure that our character's face isn't coming out of shot, which it shouldn't be. And the last thing we're going to do on the shot camera is lock its translate and rotate channels, so we won't be able to move it by accident, by any chance. So let's make sure we have the camera still selected. You can go to view, select camera, okay, and then select the translate and rotate channels, right mouse button click and go down to lock selected. So now even if we tried, we couldn't move this camera. Okay, now we can go to our perspective, and with all of these things done, we've completed this lesson, and we can now move on to the next lesson where we'll actually start animating. Now we'll begin animating the facial expressions. So from what we saw from our end result of this warm-up lesson, we're going to be working on 3 expressions in this order: scared, upset, and happy. And those expressions we'll add on our head turns. Okay? So let's go ahead and select the controls that we'll be keying. We won't be keying all of our facial controls, but just most of them, like the upset, sad control, the shot control. Let's also get the twitch controls in there, and our right snare and our center snare control as well, and all of the smile frown controls, so the right one and the left and also the center. And we'll get the jaw control too. With them selected, make sure we're on frame 1, and we'll hit Shift W, and that'll key all of their channels that they're made up of, so they're only translate channels. And remember, we will be using our facial animation preset, so let's go there. Okay. Now we want to start with our extreme poses first and then move on to the in-between. So let's go ahead and pose out our extreme poses. And when wanting to figure out where certain poses should be, okay, at what time they should occur, definitely look at live reference. Can't stress that enough. Okay, or act out your animation in front of a large mirror if you have one. Have a friend videotape you acting out your animation. It will help with timing, okay, with getting little subtleties. Okay, so I do highly recommend, again, using reference before you actually begin animating on your character. So let's start posing out our extreme poses. Okay, so remember, we'll start with our scared pose. So we'll select the shot control. We can start from there, and we'll raise that up slightly. About there is fine. Okay, and we'll also raise up our upset sad control. Let's do that. Raise that up to, let's see. Yeah, about there is fine. Okay. And for these twitch controls, let's go ahead and bring them up to their max, 0.4. Alright, for this right snare, let's go ahead and bring this up too. Let's bring that up a little bit. Bring that up to about there's fine. And now let's also give them a frown. Let's go ahead and really make them look horrified. So we'll bring the smile frown control down. About there is fine. We'll also drop his jaw. So he's like, ah. Alright, so we'll go ahead and bring the jaw down some, like there. Okay, so there's our first extreme. Okay, he's really looking scared. Okay, let's work on our next extreme. So let's go down to about frame 62. And just FYI, if you ever want to have your animation playback in all views that you have open, you can just go to your preferences and do that. So we can select this icon here to get there. Okay, and once there, under timeline, you want to check on all for update view. Once you've done that, just hit save. And I don't really recommend this for scenes that may be heavy, okay, because then your animation may lag a little bit more. But notice if we scrub through our timeline, now our animation is playing back in all of our views rather than just the selected view. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in our next extreme pose. So let's go to frame 62. Now on frame 62, let's put in our upset pose. So we'll start from our shot control. There it is. And we'll now bring this down. Let's bring it down to, let's see, yeah, to about there. So we'll go down to our upset sad control next, and now we'll give our character a frown, or excuse me, our upset, give him an upset look, excuse me. Okay, so we can bring that down to, let's see, about there is fine. Okay, so he's starting to look upset. That's cool. So we'll now select our twitch controls, and let's go ahead and bring that down too. We'll bring that down out there. So just not much. Okay, we just want to have a key on there and have them moving, even though it's really subtle. Let's also drop our snare control, our right snare. We'll bring that back to its default, and we'll actually bring up our snare control. So let's do that. Like that. Okay. And for the frown, we can make a slight adjustment on that too. So let's bring that up a little bit. Not much. About there. Okay. Alright, so our angry expression is coming along. I think we can make an adjustment on our jaw control. Let's bring that up a little bit in the Y. About, yeah, about there is fine. And we'll also translate it over in the X a little. Like that. Okay, so there's our upset expression. Okay, let's now work on our last expression. So we'll put that on about frame 107. Now on frame 107, this will be the happy expression now. So for the jaw, let's bring that more to its closer to its default position of 0, right there. Okay, and we'll go ahead and raise the smile. So we'll do that, bring it up to its max, and we'll drop the snare. Okay, we'll get rid of the snare. Okay, let's also bring up the right and left smile frown control just to add a little bit more to our smile. We don't want to bring it up too much. About there is fine. Okay, for our twitch controls, let's bring those down close to their default position of 0, but not all the way there. About there is fine. Okay, now we'll get that angry look off of him, so we'll bring up the upset sad control closer to its max position and to its max with the sad. So about there is fine. And for the shock control, let's also bring that up a little bit too. So we'll bring that up about there. Okay, so there's our happy expression. So we have all of our extremes in. Let's now go to our shot cam. So we'll go to our perspective and we'll load up our shot camera. There it is. And let's do a play blast to check out our results. So we'll go ahead and do a play blast now. And again, we want to take this time while the play blast is rendering to really view our animation while it's playing back slow. This is a great time to view it to see any changes we may want to make, any errors that may be in the animation that we want to change, or even any poses that we like that we want to keep. And here's the play blast. Okay. Alright, so we've got some tweaking still to do on our facial expressions. They're coming along. We've made good progress. But we now need to adjust the spacing and a few other things to get these expressions looking more believable. Okay, so that completes this lesson, and we can now move on to the next lesson where we'll start working on the in-between poses. Okay, because we've just completed our extremes. Let's work on our first in-between pass. Now we'll add more poses to our animation and also fix up the spacing of when our extreme poses occur. Let's bring back our NURBS curves, and we'll also go to our facial animation preset. We could adjust our face GUI cam. Okay, so let's look at our end result again of our for our warm-up lesson, of our second warm-up lesson, to figure out what we're going to be doing now. So we'll hit play, and we can stop right here. And so we're going to be adding this exaggerated pose, this exaggerated blink. We're just going to add to our animation when it comes time for our character to do his first extreme pose. Okay, so we're going to create that expression, and then we'll also adjust the timing or the spacing of when our other poses come into play in the animation. Okay, we'll add a little bit more to our smile as well. If we go there, go to the end of our animation, we'll add a little bit more to our smile. Okay, a little subtlety. So let's go ahead now and minimize this and start animating. So we could add that pose, our first pose, on frame 14. And on frame 14, let's go ahead and make our character have that exaggerated blink that we saw. So we'll bring the shot control down, and for the upset sad control, let's bring that down so our character looks a little bit more upset, like that. Let's also close his eyes. So we'll select the blink controls and have him blink now, like that. And we'll also drop the twitch controls, like that. Okay, so his bottom lids aren't poking through his top lids. Okay, for the smile frown control, let's also bring his smile up a little bit. right there. And let's also bring the jaw up too. Bring the jaw up just a little bit. Like right there. Okay. And for the snare control, we can bring that down to its default. Okay, because that shouldn't be activated just yet. Alright, so when we scrub through our animation, here's what we get. Okay, so you can see the timing that we've adjusted now. Let's go back to frame 14, and what we'll also do is drop the right snare control back to its default. Okay. And also, let's go to frame 22. And on frame 22, let's bring the blink controls back to their default of 0. So we'll raise them up so we can have the eyes opened up. And there's our first in-between pass. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and work now on the moving hold of how long we want this first expression here to last. So we'll use our middle mouse button technique. Okay, so we'll go to frame 24. We'll left mouse button click on frame 24, and now let's middle mouse button click on about frame 45. And once we've done that, we'll now go through and key our curves. We'll key all of the control curves that we use to make this first extreme position, or this first extreme pose. So that means the upset sag control as well, and the shock control, the snare control here. Okay, for this main snare control, let's go ahead and bring that down. That shouldn't be activated yet. Okay, we can get the twitches in there too. We'll select them both, hit Shift W to key those. Alright, for the frown control, we'll also key that, hit Shift W. Okay, and the jaw control as well, do the same. Okay, so when we scrub through our animation, here's what we get. We get this nice moving hold. Okay, so it's a nice subtle moving hold, and then we go into our upset expression. Okay, so let's work on the moving hold for the upset expression now. So let's left mouse button click on frame 64, and we'll middle mouse button click now on, let's say, about frame 76. And we'll go through now and key all of the control curves that we used to make up this pose. So we'll key the jaw control and also the smile frown control. We'll get that keyed. The snare control as well, we'll key that. And let's see, we can drop the right and left smile frown control, or bring those back to 0. Okay, because they shouldn't be activated just yet. Okay, and we'll go through select the twitch controls, we'll key those, press Shift W. Okay, for the upset sad control, we'll key that, and we'll key the shock control as well, Shift W. Okay, so when we scrub through our animation, here's what we get. And lastly, for this pass, let's go to our last frame. Okay, make sure we have some movement there. So what we can do now is just really tweak out this smile a little bit more to add a little bit more subtlety to it. Okay, so let's bring down our shock control to its default of 0. And for our upset sad control, let's do a slight adjustment to that, bring it down just slightly, like that, really subtle. For our twitch control, let's select that, and we can bring that up just a little bit. Okay, and for our right smile frown controls, we'll adjust that too. Let's bring those down a little bit, like that. Okay, and let's also adjust our jaw control. What we can do is drop the jaw a little bit, like that. And we'll also translate it a little bit more in the X. Okay, more to the character's left. Not much. Probably, let's see, probably about there will be fine. Let's go ahead and scrub through to see if we like that. Maybe bring it over a little bit more. Okay, let's now go ahead and do a play blast and see the adjustments that we've made. So we can hide the NURBS curves. Well, let's first go to our perspective view and load up our shot cam. Then we'll hide the NURBS curves. Okay, and do a play blast. And I'm just going to pause the video. Here's the play blast. Okay, so notice just from doing those slight fixes, the improvement that it's made on our facial animation. Okay, we're going to be adding a little bit more to this animation. So the reason why, like for example for the frown, while we didn't make that moving hold longer than we did, was we're going to make it seem so that there's a little story behind this. Like let's say our character here is a commander, for example, and he looks over to his right first and he sees maybe a mess that has happened and that maybe one of the younger cadets did. So he looks over, he says, "Hey," and then we're gonna have it so that the character sees probably somebody he knows, from his past or whatever, and he gets a little distracted, and that's when he brings out his smile. He's like, "How you doing?" So we're gonna continue in the next lesson on working on doing another in-between pass and getting this animation looking a lot better. Okay, and we're going to keep that little story in mind. So we've completed this lesson and we can now move on. Now we'll work on our second in-between pass. So here's where we do some fine-tuning, getting the timing and spacing just like we wanted of when certain actions occur, and adding extra poses to bring out the animation a little bit more, and so forth. Okay, so we'll hit play on our animation to see where we want to add our adjustments. Want to make our adjustments, and we'll start from this beginning segment. I think that the character goes into his extreme pose here a little bit too slow, so let's adjust the timing on that. Okay, so we'll go to our facial animation preset. Okay, once we get there, let's go ahead and do our adjustment. So we'll select all of the control curves that make up that extreme pose. Okay, with all of them selected, let's now go to frame 22 and move that up a few frames. Let's move it to about frame 18. So when we hit play now, notice our character really snaps into that extreme pose, and it's not too much of a snap. We want to stay away from too much snappiness, but we got that natural snap going on. Okay, alright, so the animation is looking a little bit better now from those tweaks. And I think we need to select the blink controls as well and adjust those. Okay, so let's also move up the blinks. Go to frame 22 and move them up also to frame 18. Okay, alright, so that's looking better. And we could also adjust the exaggerated blink that occurs just before our character goes into his scared pose. So let's do that. What we can do is go to about frame 9, and we can deselect the blinks now, and we'll just add a few tweaks on the controls, on our facial controls, like bringing up the upset sad a bit, okay, and bringing up the shot control as well, just slightly. Okay, we can go to our, let's go to our twitch controls, bring those down all the way. Okay, so when we scrub through our animation, here's what we get. Our character now, just from doing those tweaks, now the timing and spacing is adjusted when our character goes into that extreme pose. Okay, and it's looking much better now. Alright, so we'll just continue making our adjustments, and we want to keep our story in mind as well. Remember, this guy, he's like a commander, and maybe he looks over to his right and sees this huge mess. Then he gets upset, he looks over to his left and tries to figure out who did it, who made the mess, and then maybe someone enters the scene who he hasn't seen in a while, so he looks over and he's like, hey, how you doing? Okay, so we're going to keep that little story in mind. Should just add a little bit to this animation. Okay, so let's work on a moving hold now. Okay, work on more subtlety as well of this this first segment. So what we can do is add our moving hold, or add a subtle pass, we can say, on frame 35. Now on frame 35, let's do a few tweaks, like with the twitch controls. Let's go ahead and bring them down a little bit. Then we could also bring down the upset side control a little bit. Maybe bring up the shot control a little bit, like that. Adjust the right snare. Let's bring that down some. Okay, and we can get the upset sad, or the smile frown control, and let's bring that down a little bit, just slightly. Okay, so we got this nice subtle moving hold going on. And now let's go to frame 45, where our moving hold ends, just before we get to our upset look. And now we'll bring up the smile frown control like that. Okay, and then we could bring down the twitch control some. We'll also bring down the upset sad control. Okay, as well as the shot control. Let's bring that down some too. Okay, and could get our snare in there. Bring that down a little bit. Okay, let's now do a play blast to see the adjustments that we've made. So go to our shot cam, hide our curves, and do a play blast. And I'm just going to pause the video. And here's a play blast. Okay, so notice just from doing those simple tweaks how much it has improved our animation. Okay, now our character's face is moving more lifelike, more believable. Okay, so what we're going to do is start adjusting our upset. Okay, getting the timing right on that. So let's do that. Let's stop our play blast, close it out, go back to our facial animation preset, and start tweaking. Okay, and we want to figure out how we want to adjust the timing. I think it can also be a little bit faster of when he gets into his upset look. So let's select all of the controls that make up that expression. Okay, we'll get the snare instead of the right snare for now. Okay, and then also the jaw control. Then we'll go to the frame that has his upset expression, and let's middle mouse button click now on about frame 54, and we'll hit Shift W. So now our character gets into his upset look a little bit faster. But we can make a few more tweaks on it. Okay, a few more tweaks on our pose here on frame 54. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and select the right snare control now, and we'll bring it down some. Okay, and we'll also go ahead and we can bring down the upset sad control a bit, as well as the shock control. So he's going to squint his eyes and then open them up by the time he gets to his upset look, his extreme pose for the upset look. Okay, and let's see what else we could do. Let's also bring up the smile frown control a little bit. Okay, see if we could adjust the snare too a little bit too. So we can bring that up slightly. Alright. Okay, so that's coming along. Alright, let's now also do a moving hold that's going to improve the timing and spacing of when our character goes from the upset to his happy expression. Okay? So what we're going to do is go to about frame 86, and on frame 86 we'll again select all of the controls that make up that expression for now. Okay, and once we have them selected, we'll now middle mouse button click on frame 99 and press Shift W. So now look at the adjustments that are made just from doing this simple tweak. Let's actually view that through Play Blast so we can see a more accurate representation of our animation. Okay, so we'll go to our shot cam and we'll hide our NURBS curves and kick off a Play Blast. And I'll just pause the video. And here's the Play Blast. Okay. Alright, so notice our animation is looking much better with those adjustments. And the timing is much better from when our character goes from his upset to his happy. Okay, so around this time here, we're going to have a little bit later on, we're going to have the eyes look more back at us, like we're the person that the commander here hasn't seen in a while, so he's going to be pretty excited to see us. Okay, so let's continue making our adjustments. We'll stop this now. We can close out our Play Blast, bring back our NURBS curves, and continue doing our adjustments. And the adjustments we're going to make now is on the smile, okay, on his happy expression. And what we're going to do is have our character, after his blink, we're going to have him go into more of a softer smile. Okay, so let's go to our facial animation preset and we'll adjust the smile a little bit, and we'll also adjust the blink as well, because notice his eyes are not blinking, so we'll need to adjust that. But let's do this adjustment first. So let's go to about frame 114, a little bit after his blink, and we'll just simply bring down the upset sad control a little bit and the shocked control as well. Okay, so now he's got a warmer smile. And let's also adjust the blink now. So we'll go to about frame 109 where the blink occurs, and we'll bring down his shock control like that, and we'll also bring down the upset sad control. Let's bring that down a little bit. So he's blinking now. Okay. Let's now do a Play Blast to see the adjustments we've made. So go back to our shot cam, hide our NURBS curves, and do a Play Blast. And again, I'm just going to pause the video. And here's the Play Blast. Okay. Alright. So our animation's looking much better now from those simple tweaks. Okay, we've got his expressions looking more lifelike, more natural. And what we can now do is move on to the next lesson, which is going to be our final pass. This is where we do our final fine-tuning, where we put the icing on the cake and really get the animation finished up. So that's what we'll do in the next lesson. In this lesson, we'll complete our facial animation warm-up. Here's where we add our last pass, applying our final touch-ups. We want to look for any areas that look a bit off and adjust those areas, and even add a few more poses if we need to, which we'll actually do to the eyes, okay, and a few more areas. So let's begin. We'll bring back our NURBS curves, and we'll go to our facial animation panel, and we'll scrub through our animation. We'll start from this beginning segment to see what we can adjust. And I think we can adjust the timing and spacing of the blinks, okay, so that they look more natural. So we'll select both blink controls, and let's now go to our perspective graph view, and we'll hit F in our graph so we can focus, okay, more on our entire F curve. And what we want to do is go to where our second blink is occurring on frame 14. We'll select that key. There are actually two keys from the left and right blink control, so we want to make sure we have both of them selected. And with this key selected on frame 14, we'll hit F so we can see the curve in more detail. Okay, and what we're going to do, the fix we're about to do, is similar to what we did in the first warm-up lesson. So we break the tangency, then we hit W on our keyboard just so we can go into one of our manipulators to be able to move our tangent handles around. And we'll select the left half of the tangent handle and middle mouse button, click and drag up now. And we'll adjust it like so. We'll do the same thing for the right side. Then we'll offset one of our blink controls slightly, like this left one for example, just so that the movement of our blinks are not entirely symmetrical, but they have some asymmetry to them. Okay, and again, that's to add to the natural movement of the blinks. Okay, let's now go back to our facial animation preset and we'll scrub through our animation to see what else we can adjust. Let's select our jaw control. Let's see. Okay, let's adjust this here. Let's go to about frame 62 and we'll translate the jaw upward. Okay, and the reason why we want to do that is so we have some nice subtlety from frame 62 to 76. Okay, and we'll scrub through even more. Continue scrubbing, and let's also go to about frame 90 and we'll drop the jaw some. Again, just for a subtle movement. Just like that, so we can get some more natural movements out of our character's face. And let's adjust the right and left smile frown controls. And what we're going to do is go to about frame 96 and we'll just drop the controls. We'll drop our character's mouth. So by the time we get to our extreme pose here, this happy expression on frame 107, the movement of our smile frown controls is a little bit faster. Rather than having a slow transition of what we had before with those controls, we sped it up a little bit. Again, to add a little bit more to our animation. Let's now do a play blast to see our adjustments. So we'll go to our perspective and load up our shot cam and hide our nerves curves and do a play blast. And I'll just pause the video. And here's our play blast. Okay. So though those movements were subtle, they definitely added to what we had, added to more of the natural movement of the face. And we could even hit period on our number pad so we can view the face in more detail. Okay. Let's now continue with our adjustments. So we'll go ahead and close out this F check now. And what we're actually going to do is animate the eyes. And the way we're going to do this is, well, we can make it similar to one of those situations where, let's say we notice a certain object moving out of the corner of our eye, so we take a quick look and then look back where our focus was before, and then suddenly realize that we recognize that target and quickly bring our focus back to it. So that's how we're going to animate the eyes, so that when our commander here looks back at us, he's happy to see us. All right. Okay, we're going to give him somewhat of a surprise. So let's go to frame 83 and we'll key in the translate X and Y just so we can have our eyes targeted from frame 73 to 83 here. Then we'll go about 3 frames after and now have our commander's eyes looking at the target at the corner of his eye, and we'll have him focus on that for a few frames. So we'll middle mouse button click now on frame 89 and key in the translate X and Y. Okay, so now he's locked onto that target just for a little while. Then let's go 2 more frames after frame 89, so about frame 91, and we'll now have the character's eyes look back at what he was focused on before. And then on frame 94, he looks right back at us because he realizes, hey, good to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. Okay. So when we scrub through, here's what we get. And let's now do a play blast to see what we've just done. Okay. So we'll hide the nerves curves and kick off a play blast. And again, I'm just going to pause the video. And here's the play blast. Okay. Alright, so now our commander here is a little bit surprised to see us. Okay, he sees us at the corner of his eye and he's like, hey, how are you doing? Okay, how's it going? And the last adjustment we're going to make to this animation now is going to be on that last head turn. Okay, we're going to adjust a few tangents so that the movement of that last head turn matches with his last expression. So let's close out this F check, bring back the NURBS curves, and we can stay in our shot cam for now. What we're going to do is select the head control and then go to our perspective and graph editor view, and we'll be adjusting the rotate X and the rotate Z. So we'll start with the rotate X and hit F so we can frame the curve, and what we're going to do is have it so that his head dips down a little bit more, just to add to that, more to his surprise. Okay, so let's go to frame 99 and select the key on frame 99, and we'll now hold shift and middle mouse button click and drag up so we can just move in that direction, and we'll dip his head down a little bit more like that. And now let's go ahead and add that same, we're going to add that not the same movement, but we will adjust the rotate Z now. So we'll go to that channel in our graph editor outliner, select the key, hold shift, middle mouse button, click and drag down now. So we can tilt his head a little bit to his left, like that. So when we scrub through, here's what we get. Okay, now he's like, hey, how you doing? Let's now do a final play blast. Okay, so we'll go to our perspective, and we go to our shot cam, hide our curves, and do a play blast. And again, I'm going to pause the video. Here's the play blast. Okay, so we added a nice head turn there at the end to again add to the last expression of our character's face. And that's our final result. I do encourage you to even add more to this if you like, okay, to see what else you can do to really improve the animation. Okay, it also depends on what type of style you're going for. If you want to add something more cartoony, maybe you could really exaggerate the expressions a little bit more, or if you're going for more photoreal, just tweak accordingly so you can really get the character's face moving more believable, more lifelike. But we sure went through a ton of great material. We've discussed some fundamental principles of animation. Okay, we learned some really cool tips and techniques that can be applied to any of your characters. So in the next lesson, we'll actually get into the main project, where we'll focus more on lip syncing and animating to dialogue. In this first lesson, we'll get our scene ready for our dialogue animation. This scene is called main lesson _01, and it's also in the My Data folder. Let's now take a look at the end result of this main project. So I'll bring that up. Hey there! Have you seen the rest of my body? Okay, so we've got a little humor in this. The character's lost his body and he's asking us if we've seen it around. So this is where we get into lip syncing and animating to dialogue. We'll be learning the great techniques of animating believable and appealing dialogue animation. We'll be putting personality in our character, another essential principle in animation if we're to create empathy within our project. So let's get to it. The first thing we want to do is go to our F check and make sure that it's playing back at 30 frames per second. So our play blast will be synced up with our audio file. So let's go to Window and just do a play blast and hit escape. Okay, so we can stop it and just go up here and change it to 30. Hit enter, and that's all we have to do there. So we can now close out our F check. And the next thing we'll do is import our audio, so let's do that. We'll go up to File, Import, and we'll go to the options, and I'll bring them to their default settings. Okay, so all we need to do is go to the file type and change that to audio, and the options change slightly, but we won't be changing anything in it. So just select import, and it should navigate you to this dialog folder, but if not, it's in the My Data folder. From there, go to dialog, and then here's the audio file that we'll be using, audio lip sync. So just select it and select import. Okay, now what we need to do is basically put our audio on the timeline so we'll be able to listen to it and scrub through it. So let's right mouse button click on the timeline, go down to sound. It is getting cut off in the video, but you'll still be able to navigate to it. So under sound, just select the audio file. And it doesn't look like it's loaded up, but what we need to do is just go ahead and change our end time here. So we'll change the end time to about the duration of the clip, which is 275. Okay, then we can play back to see if everything's working correctly.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
Excellent. Okay, and also we do have reference footage, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that up now.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
So this reference footage is for you to help you really examine the mechanics of the eyes, the facial expressions, lip movements, etc. And it also has frame count and audio wave information to help you further with timing certain actions. And what's cool is that you'll be able to load it up in QuickTime format and scrub through it frame by frame and really look at the motion in detail. Okay, and the last thing we're going to do is go ahead and make a shot cam. So we're going to keep it a little bit more production oriented. So let's go up to create, and under create we'll just create a regular camera, and let's call this camera shot cam. We'll hit enter. Okay, now we want to look through the camera so we can position it. So with it still selected, go to panels and select look through selected. Okay, now we'll go ahead and position the camera, and let's position it right at our character's face in somewhat of an angle, just to keep the shot a little bit more interesting, like that. Okay, and once we found a position that we like, we'll go ahead now and lock our translate and rotate channel so we don't accidentally move the camera. So I'll go ahead and lock the camera now, and now we can go back to our perspective view. And with all of these things done, that completes this lesson, and we can now move on to the next lesson where we'll begin animating. Let's start animating. So we want to take the techniques we've learned from our warm-up lessons and apply it here, our main project. And now to make this process of animating to dialogue much more convenient for us, we actually have a checklist that we're going to go by. This checklist is going to help us to stay organized with our animation. It'll actually make it easier on us by breaking down the animation in sections, and by doing so, it'll speed up workflow. So this is going to be great to use for all types of dialogue animation. Let's go ahead and take a look at it now. I'll bring it up. What we see is how we're going to tackle this animation from top to bottom. First we're going to work on the jaw movements, and then once those are done we'll move on to the lips and tongue movements, and then the head movements, and then the brows, then the eyes, and then finally we do our final adjustments, our last tweaks, and finish up the animation. Okay? And again, this is going to make it easier on us, as we'll see when we begin keying. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that now. And also there's a few things we want to keep in mind. First, we want to get inside the character's mind. We want to figure out what he's thinking. So remember empathy. The audience should be able to relate with our character, with his emotions and expressions. Okay, and also a few things to keep in mind about animating to dialogue. For lip syncing, we want to animate not letter by letter, but rather sound by sound. So we don't want to animate each word, but rather the sounds that those words make. Okay, and we can see that based off our reference footage. If we look at the section, especially where the character's saying, "Have you seen the rest of my body?" If we look at our reference footage there, you can see definitely what I'm talking about. And also, we want to keep our actions, our main poses, about a few frames, like a frame or two before the sound occurs. Otherwise, our timing of our animation may look off. Okay, so there's going to be a few exceptions, but as a majority, okay, that's what we want to do. Keep our main poses a few frames before the sound for that reason. So once we've done these things, we can now go ahead and begin. Okay, so let's go to our facial animation preset, and we'll just marquee select our face window, our GUI window here, and deselect the window itself because we don't need that selected. We just want to select all of our control curves here. And with them selected, we'll now hit Shift W to key all the translates, and also Shift R to key all of the the scale channels that we have. Okay, so we also need to select our tongue control and key the tongue stick out channel, but everything else is fine. And when we've done that, we're now ready to begin. So let's do that. Remember, we're starting with the jaw, so we'll go into our translate manipulator, and so we can start moving our jaw around. Okay. And also another thing I want to note is that I won't be using the reference footage, but it is there for you. Okay, that's why we made it. So just in case you run into any areas where you're not sure how, let's say, a certain mouth shape should look, just go to that reference footage. Okay, so we'll begin. Okay, so from frame 1 where we have our keys, let's move on to where our next pose will be. So here's where the character's saying, so what we want to do there is go ahead and drop the jaw to match with that sound. Like that.
Hey!
And then we'll scrub through. Remember, we want to scrub through to see if we like the timing when our actions are occurring.
Hey! Yeah!
Okay, so here's where the character's saying, hey. So let's go to about frame 51, just about the time where the character's saying, hey. And we'll drop the jaw. A little, not much, right there.
Hey! Yeah!
Scrub through to see if we like the timing. Okay, and we'll continue. And right about the time where the character's finished saying hey, at about frame 60, let's go ahead and bring up the jaw some. Yeah, about there. Okay. And we'll continue.
Hey there!
So here's where he's saying hey there. So we have another hey coming up. So let's go to about frame 70, just before he's saying hey, and hey there, and we'll drop the jaw again. Okay. Not much. About there. Okay, here's where he's saying there. So let's go to about frame 79, about where he's saying there, and we'll bring up his jaw some. Not much. About there is fine. Let's scrub through. Okay, that's coming along. Let's go to now about the point where he's done saying there at about frame 88. And on frame 88, we can go ahead and bring up his jaw now. At about there. And here's where he's getting into his laugh. So for the laugh, we can go to about frame 91. Okay, just before the sound of the laugh is occurring. And let's now bring down his jaw for the laugh. Let's see. At about, it's a pretty big laugh, so yeah, about there would be fine. And notice how we're also getting some nice natural snapping going on. Okay, we want to also try to achieve that. We don't want it too snappy because then again the animation will look abrupt, but we want to get some natural snappy movements going on in our animation, and that'll add to the appeal of it. So okay, and he's laughing, and his laugh is about done at about frame 133. So at frame 133 we can go ahead and bring up his jaw at, let's see, yeah, about there, almost where his mouth is closed. Okay, so we've got just about half of our extreme poses for our jaw. Okay, so what we can now do is a play blast of our progress, and I know it's not much, we haven't put much in, but we still want to do the play blast to see if we like the timing of how everything's going. So what we can do is hide our NURBS curves. Okay, so we can just focus on our character's face without any distractions. And also I want to note that since we'll be play blasting often, I actually have a mail script that I'm going to run that'll run the play blast for me. And also for recording purposes, my play blast will be done in AVI format from now on. Okay. So I'm going to pause the video and load up the mail script. And there it is. So now go ahead and run the play blast. Okay, and remember we want to spend this time while the play blast is rendering to really examine our animation to see if there's any tweaks we want to make.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
Okay, and again, it's not much. Okay, we haven't put much in, but we still want to get into the habit of play blasting to check our timing. And with that, that completes this lesson. We can now move on to the next lesson where we'll continue putting in our extreme poses for our jaw. Let's continue animating the jaw. We'll continue placing our extremes for the jaw. So let's go to our jaw control and make sure we're in our translate manipulator. Okay, and we'll continue where we left off. So right after the laugh, now we're getting to the point where the character has realized again, or has remembered that he is missing his body and he's getting a little bit depressed now. So we'll work on this sound. Let's go to about frame 139 and we'll drop his mouth to match that sound. About there. We want to scrub through, see if we like the timing and the pose. Alright, great. So let's continue. So here we have this somewhat of a long pause, so we can close the mouth here. Now let's go to about frame 179 or 178, just about there, and we'll close his mouth some. Like that. A long pause. And now let's see. Now he's about to start talking. Again, so he's saying have. So we need to have his mouth have that shape for have. So let's go to frame 190. And on that frame, we'll open up his mouth like that for have. Scrub through. Okay, and continue. So now he's saying you and have you. So on about frame 193, what we can do is close his mouth some. Okay. Like that. Because we want to have his mouth get ready for the U shape that we'll be giving it a little bit later on. So his mouth should be closed like that. Now he's getting ready to say scene. So we need to open up his jaw a little bit. Let's do that on frame 196. So on frame 196, we'll just open up his jaw slightly, or his mouth. About there. Scrub through. So now he's going to saying the rest. So we need to give him that mouth shape. So on about frame 202, what we'll do there is just drop the control a little bit more. Because there he's saying rest. The rest. Okay, now he's getting ready to say the M in my. He says rest of my. So since we are putting our extremes in, let's go to frame 208 and close his mouth to get it ready for the M shape that we'll be giving it a little bit later on. Like that. And now he's saying the ah and my. So let's go to frame about 210 and open up his mouth to match that sound. Like that. Now he's saying the b and body. So we're going to need to close up his mouth, okay, for that B shape. So we'll do that. Let's see. About there. Now he's saying the ah and body. So we'll go to frame 216 and open up his mouth. Probably about there. Alright, great. And now he's saying the E in body. He's finishing up that sentence. So on frame 219, we'll now close up his mouth some for the E shape that we'll also be animating a little bit later on. Like that. Alright, great. So we've completed our extreme poses even for when our character starts speaking again. Now let's go to our last frame. Make sure we have movement on about our last frame. And we'll close up his mouth some. Because if you look from the end result of this lesson, the lips have somewhat of a pout. Okay, just to add a little bit more to the humor of this. Kind of like that. There we go. Because he is kind of sad. He's missing his body. Alright, great. So once we've made these poses, we can now do a play blast just to see if we like the timing of the poses as well as the poses themselves. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a play blast.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
Okay, great. So we've got our extreme poses in for the jaw movements, the translate Y of the jaw. So now what we can do is move on to the next lesson where we'll start working on the in-between poses and getting the jaw movements looking much better. Now we'll work on the in-between pass of the jaw. So this is where we make the jaw movements better. We add things like subtle follow through and more poses just to improve the jaw movements. Okay, so we'll select the jaw control and begin. We'll go to our translate manipulator and let's start from this first segment. And notice, if we notice from frames 1 to 40, we get this slow transition where the jaw is opening for when the character is saying his first word. Okay, and it should be the jaw movement, or the mouth should open up a little bit faster than it is right now. So what we're going to do is go to frame 30, and on frame 30, we'll close the mouth up some. Like that. Okay, so now when we scrub through from frames 30 to 40, notice we get some better spacing, better timing and spacing of when the character opens his mouth for his first word. Okay, and we still have a long transition from frames 1 to 30 now, or we could add another pose in between just to get the jaw movements more interesting. So let's go to about frame 11, and on frame 11 we'll bring up the jaw a little bit more. So we'll close the mouth a little bit more so it's more sealed. Like that. Okay, so when we scrub through, here's what we get. And if we notice, we're getting some nice subtle follow through from frames 11 to 30 with the mouth, okay? Because from frames 1 to 11, the mouth is closed, okay? And then from frames 11 to 30, it's opening slightly, okay, for a little bit of anticipation for the first word being said. Okay, so let's continue. So now the character's going from saying to hey. And what we want to do is add a pose in between these two frames. So from frames 40 to about 51. Okay, for similar reasons why we added poses in the first segment. He's going from saying one word to the next. So between that, on frame 46, we'll just close the mouth a little bit. Okay, not much. like that. Alright, so let's continue. Alright, so now he's going from saying hey to hey there. So let's add another pause in between frame 60 to about frame 70 here. For the same reason we added a pause on frame 46, but this time we'll go to frame 66 and we'll close up the mouth. No, not all the way, but just slightly. Kind of like right there. We'll scrub through. Alright, great. So now the character's mouth is opening up a little bit faster from where he's finished saying hey to where he's starting to say hey there. And on this part for hey there, we'll add another pause in between, like on frame 75, for where the character's saying hey to where he's saying there. Okay, so we're basically closing up the mouth, not all the way, but on frame 75 we'll close it up a little bit. About right there. Alright, great. And we'll continue. On there, let's have the mouth close a little bit faster than it is right now. So on frame 83, okay, right when the character's just about done saying there, we'll just have the mouth close a little bit faster. Again, so let's go ahead and close up the jaw some. Like that. Okay. Alright, great. So now we're moving into the laugh. And what we're going to do for the laugh is have the jaw or the mouth translate up and down like this, just to add a little bit more interesting movement to the jaw. Okay? And we're going to make it subtle. We're not going to do anything big like ha, ha, ha. Nothing like that. We're going to make it more, again, subtle movement. Okay? So let me go ahead and undo this key. Just wanted to show you that example. So let's see. He starts his laugh right here. So that's the first ha. So what we want to do is go to about frame 97 and have the jaw close slightly. Like, see, like that. And then for the next ha coming up, we'll have the mouth open up again. So on frame 102, let's go ahead and open up the mouth some. Like that. And we'll have it close slightly on about frame 106. So about right there is fine. And for the next ha, about frame 110, we'll open up the mouth again. Okay, not as much as we did for the ha before this. What about there? Okay. So when we scrub through. Alright, great. And let's have the mouth close a little bit on about frame 117, just as the laugh is about to finish. Okay. So there we'll just bring up the mouth a little bit more, like that. Okay. So now's a great time to do a play blast to see what we've got so far. to see if we like the timing and the poses as well that we've just set. So let's go to our face cam and we'll just do a play blast here. And also I want to note that we will be doing play blasts in our shot cam a little bit later on, but right now there's no real need to do that.
Hey there! Have you seen the rest of my body?
Okay, so we've made great improvement on our jaw. Okay, we've got some nice movement going on our in-between pass. So that completes this lesson, and we can now move on to the next lesson where we'll complete our in-between pass for the translate Y of the jaw. Now we'll complete the translate Y pass of the jaw. So we'll select our jaw control, go to our translate manipulator, and continue where we left off, which is right after the laugh. So let's see. Around here the character's taking a little breath. So on frame 126, let's go ahead and bring up the jaw control slightly. Not much. About there's fine. And we'll continue. Let's see. Let's go to frame 158 and we'll drop the jaw just a little bit more between what the character's saying. Okay, like that. So his jaw will be dropped between the span of time. And we'll continue. I think there's too slow of a transition from when the character is about to speak. Okay, between these two frames or these two keys on frames 178 and 190. Okay, let's look at that area in a little bit more detail actually. So what we can do is select this icon on our range slider and slide it down. And let's slide it down to about frame 162. That's fine. So notice we can see this area again in more detail. Okay, and really see where we'd like to make adjustments. So let's go to frame 184. And on frame 184 we'll just close the mouth up some. Like about right there is fine. And we scrub through. Now the character begins to speak from frames after frames 184, so that timing's better. So we'll continue. Let's add another pose between frames 202 and 208. Okay, to adjust this timing and spacing here. What we can do there is move up the jaw just slightly, not much, like that. Okay, so that's better, where the character's saying rest of my. Alright, great. I like that timing, so we'll continue. That's fine. Okay, let's add another pose between frames 219 to 275, our end frame. Okay, because if we notice, there's too long of a transition between those frames, and the timing and spacing is definitely off. So let's go to 233, frame 233, and we'll seal the mouth. We'll go ahead and close it up a bit, like that. So now when we scrub through, we get some better timing. Okay, the mouth closes faster, and we get some nice subtlety from frames 233 to 275. Okay, so we put in our poses for the translate Y, our in-between pass. What we can now do is go to our graph editor and do a few adjustments on our tangency to see if we need to at all to get the best look out of our translate Y movements of the jaw. So let's go to our perspective graph view. We'll hit F to frame our F curve, And we could also slide our range slider back to frame 1, our start frame. And we'll continue, or we'll start from the beginning to see if we can make any adjustments. Okay, so go ahead and focus on this area. And remember, we want to mainly look for keys that aren't peak keys to see if we need to adjust the tangency. So for example, this would be a peak key, and this key here on frame 40 would be as well as this one, but this key is not. It's an in-between. So let's see if we can adjust this tangency at all. And I like the timing that we're getting here, so I think that's fine. So let's continue. Oh, let's focus on this area here between frames, or on frame 60 and 66. If we go ahead and look at these two keys, at the tangency, notice we're getting this flat line in our F curve, and we don't want that, especially in organic animation, because the character should constantly be moving, and right now we're getting a few dead frames. Okay, and I know this tangency here is not perfectly flat, but I think it could be adjusted a little bit more. So let's select this key on frame 66, hold shift and middle mouse button, drag down slightly like that. Okay, and we're getting some nice subtlety now from frame 60 to 66. Great, so let's go ahead and continue. Let's focus on this area here. Let's see, we'll scrub through slow. I like the movement, so let's continue. There's the laugh. I think that's fine. Let's see. We'll focus on these frames. The keys on frames 117 to 126. That timing's fine. Okay, and we'll continue. Let's see. Then we're getting some nice subtlety from frames 226 to 133. I mean 126 to 133, excuse me. So that's fine. And we'll continue. I like the timing there. I think that timing's fine. And now we're getting into where the character's speaking. So if we want to focus on this area in a little bit more detail, we can select this key, for example, on frame 196 and hit F. And let's see. I think the timing's fine here. And I like the timing at the end. Okay, so let's do a play blast to see if we like the adjustments that we've made. We'll go to our facial animation preset. There we go. And we'll hide our character's nerves curves just to focus on the face.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
So that's the translate Y pass of the jaw. And with that, that completes this lesson.
Hey there.
And we can now move on to the next lesson where we'll actually work on the translate X pass of the jaw. The translate X movement we're going to work on now is going to make our current jaw movement a little bit more interesting to look at, a little more appealing. Let's select our jaw control and we'll go to our translate manipulator. Okay, so it's going to be the side-to-side movement of the jaw that we're going to work on. And later on we'll actually go ahead and add a mouth roll pass. Okay, that's going to be secondary. But for right now we'll just work on the translate X movement. Just undid all of that. And also I want to note that this is, if we looked on our reference footage, it's not really too noticeable, this side-to-side movement, but we're actually going to be exaggerating it a little bit more, adding on to it. And remember, we want to start with our extreme poses first, then move on to our in-betweens. So let's begin. Okay, and our first adjustment we'll make is on frame 52. And on frame 52, let's translate the jaw little bit more to our right, not much, like that. So when we scrub through, here's what we get. And if at all it starts getting cluttered, notice how it's getting cluttered on our timeline with keys. What we can do is go to our perspective graph view, okay, and actually load up our face cam right here where the perspective would be. You could zoom into it a little bit and begin tweaking a little bit more. Also make sure we're in our translate X of our F curve, so we could just focus on that and hit F so we can see the curve in more detail. Okay, so this is going to be really helpful to see where we're placing our keys. Let's continue our adjustments. Okay. And you may be wondering how we're going to move the jaw. Well, we actually can move it from our channels here. So if we select the Translate X from this channel, from our channel box, and use the middle mouse button and click and drag side to side, notice we're still able to move our jaw control around. So we don't necessarily need to select our jaw control. Alright, that's just FYI. So let's continue. Let's go to frame 83 now. And this time we're going to roll the jaw to the left slightly. Not much. About there's fine. Okay, and we'll scrub through. Okay, let's continue. Let's see. Let's go to about the laugh area on about frame 98. And on frame 98, we'll just have the jaw move a little bit more to our left, like that. And we'll continue. Let's go to frame 130 now, and we'll move the jaw a little bit more to our right now, like that, so that it's about straightened up. And on this segment where the character's saying, let's go to about 140, frame 140, and let's bring it more, his jaw more to his left. Okay, about right there. And if we look at our graph editor, that movement might be a little bit too fast. So what we can do is select this key on frame 140, hold shift and middle mouse button, click and drag about 3 frames over or so, like that. Okay, and let's continue with our extreme poses. Let's see. Let's start focusing on the area where our character is talking, around this range. So we'll actually adjust our range slider so we can focus in, like that. And for where the character is saying you and have you seen, on frame 193, let's straighten up the jaw. Let's bring it more to our right, like that. Okay, and we'll continue. And around the time where he's saying seen, let's exaggerate that a little bit. Let's go to frame 200, and we'll just translate the jaw back to our left, slightly like that. Scrub through. Okay, and what we're going to work on now is actually at the end where the character's about done talking. We're going to have a little mouth roll, okay, where the jaw is gonna roll, and it's again gonna add to the appeal of the jaw movement. So let's get ready for that. What we can do is first go to about frame 213, and on 213 we'll now move the jaw more to our right, about, let's see, about there. Now we'll have it roll to our left, and let's do that on frame 219. So on 219 we'll now just move the jaw more to our left to have it roll like that. Notice that arc we're getting now from the jaw. And to complete the roll, for now, let's go to frame 226, and we'll move the jaw a little bit more to our left, like that. Okay. Now let's go to our end frame, our last frame, and have the jaw moving all the way till there, just subtly. So on that frame, we'll move it slightly to the left, like that. Okay. Now let's do a play blast to see if we like the movement that we're getting. So we'll go to our face cam. We're actually there already, so we could just hit spacebar in our face cam. Adjust the view somewhat, like that. Hide the NURBS curves, and do a play blast.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
So here we see the improvement that was made from our animation just by doing a simple translate X pass of the jaw, but we still have more work to do on it. So that completes this lesson, and in the next lesson we're actually going to complete our translate X pass. Let's finish up the jaw's translate X movement. We'll just do a few more tweaks to the translate X. So let's go to our perspective graph view, okay, and from there we'll also bring back our NURBS curves, select our jaw control from here. Now we can load up our face cam, okay, instead of our perspective, and be able to move the jaw control from our channel box. Let's also focus the translate X in the graph editor. Okay, so we want to add a few more poses, a few more tweaks. Let's go ahead and begin. And here we're getting this pretty long transition still, and we want to add another pose in between here. So let's go to frame 11 and do that. We'll go to frame 11, and let's go ahead and translate the jaw a little bit more to our right, not much, like that. Okay, let's continue. Let's now go to frame 30. Okay, and on frame 30, I'd say we can move the jaw a little bit more to the character's left, not much, just slightly like that. Okay, good. Look at our F curve to see what we're getting and scrub through. So we're getting some nice subtlety going on. Alright, and we'll continue. Let's see. Let's go to about frame 44. Now on frame 44, we'll just go ahead and move the jaw a little bit more to our left. Okay, not much. About there. So when the character says hey, that's when his jaw moves over more to our right. So We adjusted that timing a little bit. And we'll continue. Let's see. Let's adjust this area. See if we could. Let's go to frame 67. And on frame 67, let's move the jaw a little bit more to our right. Like that. Scroll through. Okay. Let's continue. About the time of the laugh on frame 91, let's move the jaw a little bit more to our right. Not much. Like that. Notice we're getting a small roll from doing so. We scroll back and forth. Okay. So let's continue. Let's make an adjustment on this segment. Let's go to frame 125. Now on the 125, we'll just move the jaw more to our left. About, let's see, about right there. Okay, I think the timing can be adjusted of that key we just set. Let's go ahead and select it and move it a few frames back. So we'll select it, make sure we're in one of our manipulators so we can move the key. Okay, so I just went to the translate manipulator, hold shift and middle mouse button, click and drag to our left about 4 or 5 frames. Okay. And let's also adjust this key on frame 130. Could just bring it down slightly like that so that the mouth is a little bit more centered. Okay, and let's continue now. Let's see. Let's make an adjustment on this segment on frame 178. And on 178, let's move the jaw a little bit more to the left. Not much, just a little bit, like that. Okay, to adjust the timing there. From where the character's saying, to where he's about to speak. Alright, great. And we'll continue. Okay, we could also see a better view since we're focusing in on where the character's speaking. Let's go ahead and focus our range slider in on that point. Okay, and also get a better focus in on our F curve. Let's make an adjustment on frame 208. On that frame, let's see. Let's move the jaw a little bit more to the left. Not much. Let's see there. Okay, so now the timing of is adjusted for the character saying from rest to my. Okay, so we just added another pose in there just to again adjust the timing and spacing of that area. Everything else looks fine. And lastly, let's add a pose on about frame 240. so we can change the timing that's going on right here through this long segment from frames 226 all the way to our end frame. So we'll just add another pose in there. So on frame 240, let's move the mouth a little bit more to the left, like that. Okay, so we also get some nice subtlety from frame 240 to 275 now. Now we can go through our F curves and see if we could adjust any tangents. So we'll hit F and we'll start from our beginning. Let's also bring the range slider back to the beginning so we could scrub from there. Let's see. Like the timing. Let's continue. I think that's fine. And we'll continue. Okay. Adjust the view and the F curve of the F curve. Okay. So I think the timing's pretty good. But let's do a play blast. Okay, to see more accurately how our animation is looking. So I'll go to our face cam, make a few adjustments in it.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
So that's the Translate X Pass. Notice how much more improved our jaw movements look. They don't look as boring as they did before, where it was just going up and down in the Translate X. But now we added some side to side and got a little bit more interesting movement going on. So if we go back to our list, we can now check off the jaw. Okay, so the next movement we're going to be working on is the lips and tongue. We'll be working on that section, and we'll start that in the next lesson. In the last lesson, we've completed the jaw movements for now. We've crossed it off our checklist, and any other adjustments we'd need to make on it would be around the adjustment section on the checklist, unless we need to do any further tweaks for what we're about to work on, which is actually the lips and tongue. That's the next section in the list. So let's get started. Let's go to our facial animation preset. Okay, and we're actually going to start out with our smile and frown control. Okay, now this control is not only for smiling and frowning. When we move into the smile, for example, okay, we'll actually be able to get shapes that we need for our A sounds and E sounds and more. And when we go into the frown, we'll actually use that to exaggerate certain expressions a little more. So this is a pretty efficient control, as we'll see once we begin. So let's do that. And let's say we tweak out the first frame. Let's give our character more of a frown, because he is pretty sad. He's missing his body. So we'll just translate the control down like that. Okay. Remember, we want to start with our extreme poses first. So let's go ahead and move on. Let's go to frame 38 and give him a little bit more of a frown on that frame. He's really sad, like that. So he's saying, okay, so we kind of exaggerated that. And we'll continue. So now here's where he's getting pretty excited. He's saying, hey. He sees us and he's like, hey, how you doing? So let's give him a smile now. About, let's see, about there. Pretty big smile. When we scrub through, here's what we get. Okay. And we'll continue. Let's see. Let's go ahead and go to frame 66 and drop the smile a little bit. Okay, this is going to be a little for just a little bit of subtlety, like that. And now he's about to say hey again, so let's go to frame 71 and we can crank up his smile a little bit more. Okay, like that. We'll scrub through and we'll continue. On frame 78, when he's about to say there, let's go ahead and adjust the smile frown control and we'll bring it down to give the mouth more of a V shape for there. So bring down the control. Okay, like that. And we're really going to bring out that TH shape a little bit later on when we move into the other lip movements. But we just want to focus on the smile frown control for right now. And we'll continue. Okay, so what we can do is go to frame 82 where he's saying the and there, and we'll move up the control slightly. Like that. Okay, so when we scrub through, here's what we get. Okay. So let's move on. Okay, now he's getting into his laugh. So on frame 93, let's move up the control. We could even move it up to its max of 0.3 because it's a pretty big laugh. So when we scrub through, here's what we get. Alright. So he's really happy to see us. Let's see. Let's bring down the control a bit for some subtlety on frame 120. So bring it down slightly, like that. Okay. Okay, but here is where he starts to get a little bit more depressed. Because he's remembered, hey, I'm still missing my body. Can you help me find it, please? Or have you seen it? So what we're going to do is go to about frame 152 and we'll start to bring down the smile frown control. Let's bring that down like about right there. Okay, and we're going to need to bring it down a little bit more. Give him more of a frown. And let's do that on frame 165. So on 165 we'll bring down the control now. So he's doing more of a frown. He's like, hey, have you seen my body? So remember, we want to get inside his mind, so to speak. Alright, the timer's looking pretty good. And we'll continue. Okay, so let's go to about the point where he's starting to speak again. We could even move our range slider in that area. And for where he's saying have, that's an A sound. So it's he's saying what we're going to do is adjust the lips so it's more of a, it's taking on a shape in have. So let's bring up the control a bit like that, or have. Okay, and from here we can go ahead and do a play blast to see how our animation is looking.
Hey there. uh, have you seen the rest of my body?
Okay, so though the timing may look a little bit off, we're still getting some nice movement going on from doing these tweaks we've just done for the smile frown control. So that completes this lesson, and we can now move on to the next lesson where we're going to start, or we'll actually continue, I should say, working on our extreme poses for our smile frown control. Let's continue working on the first pass of our lip movements. So we'll just continue keying our extremes for the smile frown control. Let's select it and continue where we left off. So we're at the point where the character begins to start speaking again. Let's go ahead and adjust our range slider to focus on that part. Okay. So we're in the dialogue where the character says you on frame 193. Let's go ahead and bring down the smile frown control a little bit. Okay. About right there. And we'll scrub through. Okay. And we'll continue. So now he's about to say scene. So on frame 197, let's bring up the control a little bit more. About right there. Okay, so we get the mouth shape, the correct mouth shape for what he's saying. So in this part where the character's saying seen the rest, let's go to frame 200, and we'll add another pose here where this time we'll just translate the control down a little bit more, like that. Okay, because remember our words are blending into each other. Okay, so not everything is going to be pronounced. That goes back to animating sound by sound, that principle, and we're achieving that. So let's continue. Okay, so on frame 204, we'll now bring up the control for the rest. That's the part we're on right now. So let's bring up the control. Let's see. Maybe we could bring it down a little bit more. Yeah, about there. Alright, great. Let's continue. Now he's about to say my from rest of my. So let's go to frame 208 and we'll bring down the control a bit to about right there. Getting ready for the M shape that will really bring out a little bit later on. Now he's going into saying my body. Okay, so let's put another pose on frame 217. And this time we'll just bring up the control, or let's say we bring it down just a little. Not much. At about right there. Let's see. We could even add another pose in between here. Let's do that. Let's go to frame 213. And let's see, this is the part where the character is about to say body. So we'll just drop the control so that his mouth is matching that shape or that sound. And for the E in body, let's go to frame 220. And we'll just crank up the control a little to match that sound. At about right there. Okay, great. And lastly for this pass, let's put a key. Let's put a key on our end frame where the character is in more of a frown. Okay, because he is pretty sad, remember? He is missing his body, so let's give him more of a frown like that. Alright, now's a great time to do a play blast, so let's do that.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
Alright, great. So we're making great progress. And that actually completes this lesson. So we can now move on to the next lesson where we'll start putting in our in-between pass. Now let's work on the in-between pass of the smile and frown lip movements. Okay, so we'll be working on our in-between pass. Let's go to our smile frown control. Make sure we're at our beginning. And we can even go to our perspective graph view. Okay, since our timeline is getting a little bit cluttered in a few areas. So we'll just hit F to focus on our F curve and adjust it a bit so we can see it in a little bit more detail like that. Okay, then we'll go to our face cam, load that up, and we have our smile frown control selected, so that's fine. We could even hide our NURBS curves if we wanted to, if it was any distraction. Just focus on the lips and begin. So let's see. Let's add a little bit more movement in this area from frames 1 to 39. So for our first tweak, we'll go to about frame 28. And let's go ahead and move the control a little bit upward. Not much, like that. Okay, we'll look at our curve. Maybe we could tweak it out a little bit more because we are getting somewhat of a, not a straight line, but it's straight enough where we'd need to adjust it a little bit more. So we'll bring it up a little bit more, like that. Okay, we'll scrub through. Alright, great. So let's continue. Alright, we do need to add a pose between where our character is saying, where he's in a bit of a frown, to where he's saying, hey, or he's more excited. Okay, so we need to adjust the timing there. So let's go to frame 46, and on 46, let's give him a frown still. Let's make sure he's still having a small frown. Okay, so we can adjust the timing for when he says, hey. And when we scrub through, we can see the change. Great, so the timing is adjusted there. Let's continue. Okay. Let's add a pose on frame 59. Okay, where the control is a little bit, let's bring down the control a little bit. Like that. Okay, to just fix this movement around this area. Okay, so when we scrub through, here's what we get. All right. So let's move on. Then we could have put another pose on frame 74 to also adjust this movement a bit. So let's bring up the control somewhat, like that. So here's what we get when we scrub through. Okay, so now the timing is adjusted on that area. Alright, so let's continue. We'll move on down. Let's see. Let's go ahead and put another pose on frame 88 to also adjust the timing here. Because we are getting, we want to fix this section from frames about 82 to 93, just to speed up the timing a little bit more of when the character goes into his laugh. So on frame 88, we'll just go ahead and move up the control slightly. Okay, like that. Okay, so now the timing is adjusted there. So let's continue moving on. The laugh is fine, looks pretty good. See. Let's put another pose on about frame 128 where the smile frown control is raised a little bit. Not too much. It's just for subtle movement. Okay. So he'll go into a little bit more of a smile, and now he'll start to frown. Okay. And let's also put another pose on frame 133 to adjust that timing. And we'll just drop the control a little bit. This is for subtlety. Like that. So when we scrub through, okay, look at the result we get. Got some nice subtlety going on. And we'll move on down. Alright, now we'll just start adjusting the timing of where our character's saying, where he goes from a transition from him smiling to him frowning again. So what we're going to do is go to frame 138, and on that frame we can bring up his smile slightly. Okay? Like that. And we'll scrub through to see if we like the results we're getting. Okay, so that's pretty good. And now would be a good time to play Blast.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
So that in-between pass really improved the timing and spacing of our smile and frown lip movements. So that completes this lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to continue working on our in-between pass. Now we'll finish our smile and frown in-between pass. Let's go back to our perspective and graph editor view, and from there we'll bring back our control curves. Alright, we'll select our smile frown control, then we can load up our face cam in the perspective view, hide the NURBS curves now, and continue where we left off. Okay, can even focus the mouth in a little bit more. So we left off about the point where the character is transitioning from his smile back into a frown. So we'll continue from there. Let's see. I think the timing is fine here. But we definitely want to add a pose in between this segment here. Okay, because the timing is too slow of when the character goes from his frown to where he begins to speak. So it needs to be adjusted. So let's do that. And our first adjustment could be made on about frame 174. So on 174, let's give the character a frown. Like that. Okay. And we could even adjust the timing a little bit more. So let's go now to about frame 183. And on 183, we'll drop the character's mouth into more of a frown again. Not much. Like that. And scrub through to see if we like that. Okay, maybe we could even bring up this key a little bit more. So we can select it, make sure we're in one of our manipulators, like the translate manipulator, just so we can move our key. Hold shift and middle mouse button, drag upwards, just like that. Okay. Now the timing's much better for when the character begins to talk. So we'll continue from here. Okay. I think this section's fine. But what we also need to adjust is this end segment. Because notice we're getting a long transition from where our character is done saying body all the way back to a frown. So we definitely want to add some poses in between here. So let's do that. Let's go to frame 232. And we'll give the character a frown, because he's really missing his body. And he wants to stay low key about it, but ask us at the same time, have we seen it? Have we seen it around? I really need my body back. Alright. And we're going to be animating that type of expression a little bit later on, when we get into more of the head movements. Okay. And let's add another pose in here. At about frame 260. Okay, and this is just going to be for subtlety. So we'll just give him more of a frown on about frame 260. Like that, not too much. Out there is fine. Let's see. Let's even add another pose in between here, like on frame 244. Again for subtlety. And this time we'll just bring up his mouth into a little bit less of a frown, like that. Alright, so when we scrub through, here's a movement we get. Okay, great. So that's our in-between poses. Now what we can do is go through our animation to see if we could adjust any of the tangency to get the best look. I like the timing here, that's fine. So we'll continue. I like that timing. Let's see. Let's adjust this key on frame 74. We'll just select the right side of the tangent handle and middle mouse button click and drag down so we get more of this arc like that. We'll scrub through. Alright, great. Now we'll continue moving on. Can adjust our F curve a little bit more. Okay, that's better. Alright, I like the movement there, so we can go ahead and continue. Maybe adjust the view of our F curve a little bit. Scrub through. Okay, I'd like to adjust this key on frame 138. I think it's too much. So what we could actually do is either drop it. Let's try dropping it and see what that does. Let's see if we even need it. Let's try to delete it and see what happens. We'll just delete that key and scrub through now. Okay, so we don't even need that key there. Okay, so we'll just continue our adjustments. I like the timing there. And let's see, let's get into more of a, just get into a better view. See our curve in more detail. I think this area is fine. So now we get into the part where the character begins to talk. Again. And I like this section here, but what I do want to adjust are these two keys on frame 208 and 217, just to give them more of an arc in their tangency. So we can go ahead and select this key on frame 208, select the right side of the tangent handle and drag it down like that, and do the same for the left side. Just drag it up this time, so we get again more of this arc going on. Maybe we could adjust this one a little bit more like that. Okay, and we'll continue, and I think everything else is fine.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
That is our smile and frown movement, and that completes that. So that also completes this lesson, and what we can now do is move on to the next lesson where we'll continue with our lip movements. Now we're going to work on the mouth rolls. So you just have a few adjustments to do with the mouth rolls. Okay, we're actually going to add it on top of a few of our translate X jaw movements. Okay, and that's just going to allow the lips to move a little bit more in the top section and also the bottom. Okay, so we're going to get a little bit more of the top and bottom lip moving around. Okay, just for a little bit of exaggeration. So we'll go to our facial animation preset, select the mouth roll control, and we'll be moving in the translate X. Alright, so what we'll do is scrub through our animation, find out where we want to put our mouth roll keys, and we're actually just going to set them towards the end of our animation, so we can use our time range or our range slider and just slide that down at about to frame 166, just so we can focus on this end section here. And we'll first set a key on frame 193 of the translate X at 0. Okay, just so there's no movement before that, so we could isolate the movement to everything afterwards. And as the mouth begins to move more to the character's right or left, on about frame 198, we'll go ahead and translate the control a little bit to our left. Not much. Like that. And we'll continue scrubbing. Alright, so the mouth starts to move more to the right at about frame 205. So let's go ahead now and bring the mouth roll control more to our right. Like that. Alright, great. Let's see. Let's make an adjustment on frame 209. On 209, let's actually move the control a little bit more to our left. Like that. And here's where the that jaw roll that we worked on, that's where that comes in. So we'll go to frame 213. And on 213, we'll move the mouth a little bit more to the right, slightly to the right, alright. And on frame 220, we'll now move the mouth slightly to the left, like that. And we'll bring it back more to the right on about frame 228. Let's do that. About to a value close to 0. Okay, great. And the rest looks fine. So let's see if we could adjust any of the tangency on these keys. So we'll go to our perspective graph view, zoom in, and they're pretty much all peak keys. The tangency looks fine. So that's all we had to do with the mouth roll section. Okay, so now's a good time to play blast to see how our animation looks. So let's bring our perspective to the face cam view, and we'll hide our NURBS curves, focusing on the face cam.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
Okay, so I think the mouth rolls are moving a little bit too much. Okay, so let me go ahead and close out this play blast. And all we need to do now, let's go back to our perspective graph view. And what we'll do is select all of our keys, okay, all of the poses that we've made, excluding this one here, this key on frame 193. And we'll hit R on our keyboard to go to our scale mode. And we're just going to go ahead and decrease the value that these keys have. Okay, so let's make sure that our cursor is right in between where all of our keys are, like that. And we'll hold shift and we'll middle mouse button click and drag down, and notice that decreases the value of our keys. Okay, so they'll have less influence. Let's now do a play blast with these results and see how it looks. So we'll go back to our face cam. Okay, deselect, and I'm gonna go ahead and do a play blast.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
So that movement's much better. And that completes the mouth rolls. In this lesson, we'll animate the tongue. We're only going to have the tongue stick out towards the beginning of the animation, okay, where the character says, "Hey there." And there's only one other part of the animation where the tongue might stick out. But if we look at the reference footage, the tongue isn't even really noticeable at that part. And the part I'm talking about is where the character says, "The," and "Have you seen the rest of my body?" Okay, so we won't have to worry about animating at that part. So let's go ahead and just focus on the part that we need to for animating the tongue. So we could adjust our range slider just to focus on this segment. Okay. And let's also go to our facial animation preset. We'll go there. And what we'll do first is isolate the tongue movement to where we want it to occur. So let's go to frame 72, and on frame 72 we'll select our tongue control and key the tongue. Okay, key the translate X and Y of the tongue on frame 72 at 0, as well as the tongue stick out there. And we'll have the tongue come back in on frame 80, so we'll also key the translate X and Y at 0 there, and the tongue stick out at 0 as well. Okay, and we'll have the tongue stick out on frame 76. So let's actually go to our perspective and shot cam view. We'll start using that because we need to see how far we want the tongue sticking out. So on frame 76 we'll start moving the tongue stick out. Okay, moving it to the right. Alright, about there. Okay, we'll need to translate it upwards like that, and we can also move it over a little bit in the X like that. Okay, alright, great. And we'll have the tongue hold for about a frame. Okay, so on frame 77 now, let's also move out the tongue just a little bit. Okay, and that's because when we view the playback of the tongue, the movement might be too fast to even notice the tongue. So we want to hold it for just one more frame, frame 77, and we could even move it up a little bit more. Okay, like that. When we scrub through. Alright, great. So that's coming along, but the character doesn't really look like he's saying there still, so we need to adjust a few more things. And here's where we get the snare control involved. So we'll select that, and just like what we did with the tongue, we'll isolate the movement. So we'll select the snare control, go to frame 72 and key the translate Y there, then go to frame 80 and also key the translate Y there with values of 0. Okay, and now we'll go to frame 76. Let's go to our facial animation preset so we can see this a little bit easier. And on frame 76 we'll go ahead and move up the snare control a little bit. About right there is fine. But still this doesn't really look like a there. And what we'll need to do is adjust our smile frown control. So rather than just putting a key on frame 76, okay, of the smile frown control, we can use this key on frame 74. So let's take this key on frame 74, and first we'll move it over one to the right. Okay, so delay it one frame, and we'll move the control, the smile frown control, down so we get more of a there look with the mouth like that. Okay, so when we scrub through, here's what we get. Alright, great. So that looks like there. Awesome. And what we can now do is a play blast to see if we like the movement we're getting. So we'll do two play blasts, one in our face cam and also one in our shot cam. Okay? Just to see how it looks in both cameras. So let's start with our face cam first. Let's go ahead and what we can do is bring back our range slider back to its default. Okay, with our start and end frames. Okay, and we'll hide our NURBS curves.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
Okay, so the movement looks good. Let's now go ahead and close out this play blast and do another play blast, this time in our shot cam. So we can go to our perspective shot cam view and then go to our shot cam.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
Okay, so that's our tongue movement, and that completes this lesson. Let's work on animating the F-shape controller. Now there aren't any F sounds in this animation, but we do have a V sound in the word have. And have you seen the rest of my body? Okay, and we've only got one section to animate this controller in, so let's get to it. We'll go to our facial animation preset, and we'll select the control that allows us to move our F shape around, and it's actually going to be the translate Y, okay, that will be moving. So I'll just go ahead and undo that. Let's also focus our range slider in and the area we're going to be working on, which is going to be right here, the character saying have. So first we'll isolate the movement where we want it to start and end. So we'll have it start at about frame 188. We'll just key the translate Y at 0 there. And we'll have it end right where the character saying U. So on frame 193, we'll also key the translate Y at 0. And we'll actually have the shape occur, the V shape, occur on frame 191. So let's go ahead and bring the control up a little, like that. But notice the mouth needs to be, the bottom lip needs to be up a little bit more, because the teeth should be biting down on the bottom lip. So we'll need to adjust our jaw control for that. So we'll select it, and the first thing we'll do is slide this key on frame 190 over just one frame. Okay, so we could have some space in here, some good spacing where we can put another pose. And this pose, let's add it on frame 191. We'll go to our translate manipulator so we can move our jaw, and we'll just translate it upward, just so that the teeth are now biting down on the bottom lip, like that. Okay, so when we scrub through, here's what we get. Okay. So let's see how this movement looks now in a play blast. So we can play blast in our face cam.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
Okay, so the movement looks good in our face cam view, but let's see how it looks in our shot cam.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
Alright, so there's our V shape, and with that completed, that also completes this lesson. And we've got a few more movements to go to finish up the lip shapes. So what we can now do is move on to the next lesson, where we'll start working on our M and B shapes. We'll work on the M and B shapes in this lesson. We'll be able to use the M shape controller to get our B shape too. And we've only just got one area to focus on with this controller as well, towards the end where the character's saying my and body. So we've got two words to work on. So let's get to it. We'll get to our facial animation panel, and we'll select the control, the same control for our F shape, but this time we'll only be using the scale Y. Okay, and we'll focus our range slider in to the area we just want to focus on, and we can see that this area is getting a little bit cluttered with keys. So what we can do is go to our perspective graph view. Okay, and we'll only be focusing on the scale Y for now, so we can select that and make sure the control curve is still selected. We'll switch our perspective camera to our face cam and focus in on the mouth. Okay, so let's now isolate the movement of when we want our M shape to occur, our M and B shapes. Remember, there's only two words we need to adjust, so we'll go to frame 205 first and key the scale Y there. Okay, with the value of 1, it's default. And now we can hit F in our graph editor to see a more detailed version of our F curve. Okay, so we'll scrub through. So the M is occurring at about frame, we want it to occur at about frame 208. So let's go to 208, and with the scale Y selected, we'll now middle mouse button click and drag down till we get our M shape like that. Okay, and in our graph editor we'll need to see a better view of our F curve, so we'll select this key on frame 208 and hit F. There we go. Alright, so let's go ahead and continue. So when the character says ah and my, we don't want our M shape activated there, so let's go to our scale Y now and we'll bring up the control. Okay, a little bit more, right about there. Okay, And he is blending in from saying my to body. So let's see. Let's now go to frame 212. And we'll now give him this time the V shape. So we'll close his mouth a little bit more than we did for the M shape. Like that. Scrub through to see if we like the movement. And for where the character says the ah and body, at about frame 216, we can now bring the scale Y back to 1. Okay? Since the shape shouldn't be activated there, so we can get our ah shape going on. Okay, now we can do a play blast, so let's do that. We'll go to our face cam. Okay, fix the view. Hide the NURBS curves. Bring our range slider back.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
Alright, so the movement looks good from our face cam. And now we'll go ahead and check out our shot cam to see if we still like our results.
Hey there. Have you seen the rest of my body?
Alright, so we finished up our M and B shapes.